I think we are live. Yes, we are live. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining on this Saturday. And we have five speakers for today's session. And we'll start with Jagriti. And Jagriti will be our first speaker. She'll be talking on PowerShell. And next we have Nish Anil, who will be explaining us on how to build the resilient microservices in .NET, and followed by Nish, we have Rajat Jaiswal. We will be talking on SQL Server 2019 and Power BI, and then we have Ritika Agarwal. She'll be speaking on Canvas components in Power Apps, and next we have Yash Agarwal, who will be talking on RPA with Power Automate. So pretty much nice topics to learn. And let me welcome Jagriti, our first speaker.
Thank you, Swami.
Hey Jagriti, welcome, and
Hey,
thank you so much for giving your time on the weekend.
thank you.
Um,
Thank you for inviting me. Okay, so let's start.
could you please
Yeah, I think, Swami, you are breaking up. Okay, let me share my screen and start this session.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Jagriti,
yeah,
please go ahead. I'll pull myself out of the stream.
sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so welcome to .NET Learner House, and like in today's session, the first session, we are going to discuss about the state of PowerShell today. So in this session, we are going to discuss about the updates and features of the and the new releases of the PowerShell 7.0, 7.1, and extension release for what are the new features for the VS Code extension. So, in the first topic, that is what's new in PowerShell 7.0, we are going to discuss about some of the operators that are new in this update. So first, we are going to talk about the parallelism in this. For each object loop, then there are some new operators like ternary operator, pipeline chain operator, and null conditional operators. So we are going to see about them. Then we are going to see about the concise view that has been new for displaying the error messages and the automatic new version notifications. So the first one here we are going to discuss is parallel execution added to the for each object. So like here is just a code snippet example of that. Here you can see that with the for each object we can also pass a parallel parameter with it. So what it will do is this parallel script will block the use of the current working directory, and there will be certain tasks that will be running in parallel with this loop. And here you can see that we can also pass a parameter that is throttle limit, that we can limit the number of scripts that blocks running in the parallel at a given time. So let's see that how does it work. So here I have opened this the latest release of 7.0, that is 7.0.6, and here I'm going to paste the same snippet which I showed you there. So let me paste it quickly so that we can save some time for other commands here. So here you can see, just a minute. Okay, so it's just showing me. Let me paste it here again. Okay, let's try it here. Just a minute. Yeah, so here let me paste this one again here. Yeah, here you can see that I have log names, that what kind of logs we want to fetch here. And then we are for the logs name, we are running this for each loop with the parallel parameter, and here we are passing the throttle limit as 5 and maximum events are 100. So it is going to show us the output, that how many log entries we are going to fetch. So like it is running that let me also output this. Yeah, so like here it shows all the log entries we have been fetching. So like these events were running parallelly with this for each object loop. Okay, so let's talk about the next operators here. So next in the line is the ternary operator. Like you might have heard about the conditional operators in the other languages, right? So same here, we can do that in PowerShell 7.0. It has introduced the ternary operator that behaves like a simplified if-else statement. So what it will does is like there will be a certain condition or expression, and it will evaluate the result and convert into the boolean. So depending on the boolean value, that either it is true or false, it is going to output the value. So let's see how does this works here. So like after this, let me quickly paste these commands here. Yeah. So here, what I'm doing is like I have used this path variable, and I have initiated with it as with a certain path. So now here in the next condition, what we are checking, that this path exists or it doesn't exist. So suppose so as you can see, I'm in under this working directory, so this path exists, so it will evaluate the this expression, and depending on the value, it is going to print that yes, this path exists. So let's see the message here. So here you can see that it shows that path exists. So suppose if there was some path that does not exist. So let's check that. So suppose let's give that there is a dummy value here, that this is the path that does not exist, right? So once then let me use this again and show that okay, and now let's check that what the message is. So okay, let me paste it again. Here I'm giving the dummy value here. Okay, and here I'm again assigning this message here. Okay, and let's check the message here. So yeah, here it says that path does not exist, because this is a dummy path which we passed here, and based on the condition, it checks that does this path exist. So it says that no, it outputs the result false, and then it prints this value, that path does not exist. Okay, so let's check the next parameter here, the next operator here. So those are the pipeline chain operators. So what these are like and operators to conditionally chain the pipelines, and these are much more similar to the and or operators which are used in like different shells like bash, and we might have been heard about like and or operators using in different languages. So what the and operator does, it executes the right hand pipeline if the left hand pipeline succeeds. Okay, and in the or operator, it executes the right hand pipeline if left hand fails. Okay, so like it is much more similar to the other and operators in the different languages. So let's check that how we can see the working of this one. So here I'm just using these right output right output expression, just to show that how does this work. Okay, so here I'm like using this as the left hand operator, and this as the right hand operator of the pipeline, and this is the AND operator. So here, like as we seen that it will print both, as if the left one succeeds, it prints the right one also. So here you can see that it has print the left and right both, right? So suppose the first one fails. Okay, so let's check that what will happen when the left one fails. So here, when we check this, it only prints the left one, because it didn't got succeeded, so it didn't went to the right hand operator of this expression. Okay, so let's check with the same with the OR operator. So here you can see I'm just replacing this AND operator with OR operator, and let's check what it does print. Okay, so here you can see that it prints the left, because it has already succeeded, so it doesn't went to that right hand operator. Okay, and let's check with this expression here. Yeah. So here you can see that it prints the both the left hand operator and right hand operator both. So why does it does? Because this failed, right? So for the OR operator, if this fails, then only the right hand operator is evaluated. So that's why in this case we can see that we can see that the both of the operators has been the left hand side and right hand has been printed. So you can check the difference between the and or, like they are quite converse of each other, they are reverse of each other, the and or operator. Okay, so let's check the next one. So the next one is null coalescing and the conditional assignment operator. So null coalescing operator, it's like it returns the value of its left hand operator if it isn't null, right? So like it checks the value of value, that if it is null or not. If it is not null, then it provides the value which we have provided on the right hand side of the expression. And in the next operator, which is quite bit similar to this one, so it assigns the value of the right hand operator if it's equal to null. So let's check that how does this work. Okay, so let's check this one here. Yeah. So here you can see that I'm assigning this variable value to null. Okay. So in this case, the value is null. And if we are using this operator here, and here if we will check, it returns the value 100, right? Because like the null coalescing operator, it will return the result if it is null. So let's check with the value, if it has any value, right? If it has value, and here we check 100, then it has returned the value of this particular variable because it was not null, right? Okay, and let's check one more example of this here, and let me paste it here. So in this case, like I have mentioned this variable with the today's date, right? So it is not null, so that's why it will pick up this variable and print the value of this variable. So here you can see that whatever I have input here, it has printed that value. Okay, so in a similar fashion, we can check the null assignment operator also. So I'm doing the same with the above expression, and I'm just putting that particular operator here. So here you can see, right? So as you can see, the value of this particular variable was null. So let's check that what's the value of this variable. So here you can see the value of this variable has been changed to 100, because the value of this variable was null. That's why it has assigned the value. So let's check with the value when it has some actual value here, and let's check with this and print the value of this variable. So here you can see that the value of this variable is 1 here, because it has assigned that, it doesn't assign that this value to this variable because it already had one value, right? And I just wanted to show the difference between this version, this is like 7.0.6, and here, like if we check something similar in the previous version, that is like 7.0.0, here if we paste this value here, it shows that it doesn't identify this operator, because these are the new features and the updated features of this of the new version, so that we can use these operators in the newer versions. So it's just example that it doesn't supports here. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so the new view, that is concise view for the get error, like the partial 7.0 new version has enhanced the display of the error messages to improve the readability and the interactive scripts. And like with the concise view, here you can see that in this get error, you will see that it shows the single line error if the error is not from the script, or or it is not a parser error, right? And if it's from the script execution, or because of the parsing error, it returns the multi-line error, so that from that we can understand that what the actual error message is this here. And like in this new version, the default view is concise view, and like in the previous versions it was normal view, right? But in this it is a concise view, and this get error can also be can also support the input from the pipeline using the built-in variable error. So let's see how does this work. So here, if we will check the error view first, that what's the default error view. Here you can check that this is the concise view here, right? And here, if let's check with error here. So here I'm checking for a dummy path here, so that it gives error to us, right? So here, as you can see, that it has given the error in a single line, right? Because it was not from any script execution, right? And we can also like check this get error here. See, so like it is providing all the information here, that what are the like errors, and what are the error messages, and what are the cause of that error, and all that take trace here, so that we can find the message to be valuable, so that we can find that what's the actual error here. Okay, so let's move to the next one here. The new version notification. Like in this new version, you can see the alerts on the top of the terminal. It always says that, like, if there are any updates to the version, or there are any new releases, you will always be able to find that in the topmost header of that particular PowerShell window, so that it will always determine a new version is available. And like, suppose we just want the notifications for, like, suppose we want notifications for only the LTS releases, and we want something specific, then we can change this environment variable here to the LTS, or we can change it to default, depending on our needs, so that we can be notified according to that. So let's check here. Like here, if you will let me open a new window to just show that. So here you can see that it is showing that a new PowerShell stable release is available, that is 7.1.3, right? So like every time you open a PowerShell window with the older version, you will always get notified with this new version, right? So that if you want to use the new stable version, you can go and download that particular version. Okay, so let's move to this next slide here. So what's new in PowerShell 7.1? Right, so like there are some new features in PowerShell 7.1 that are like PS Readline 2.1.0, which includes the predictive intelligence, so that we can use that intelligence, and like using the expressions and using the operators can be easy. 7.1 has been published to Microsoft Store also. Installer packages updates for the new OS version with the support of ARM64. And like there are four experimental features and two experimental features promoted to the main version. So this is the reference link. You can go to this GitHub link here, and you can check that what are the change logs for this particular version here, and you can download this from here, and you can check all the change logs and the releases here. Same with 7.0.6 release. You can check that what are the changes, and you can download from either you can download the MSI file or zip file from here, from this GitHub URL, that is github.com partial releases, right? And the next in the series here, that is what's new in the PowerShell extension release. Like there are new semantic highlighting, added faster v5 support to the problem matcher, updated PS script analyzer, and like they have also updated resolve few of the bugs. And for this also you can go to this GitHub link here present here for that particular VS code, so that you can check these, that what are the new features available here, and you can like download these from here, and you can check these releases and updates from this page here. So yep, that's it from my side, and stay tuned for the other sessions. Thank you.
Hey Jagrati, thank you so much for your session. I really appreciate it and learned few new things which are coming in. And let me welcome Nish, our next speaker. Nish,
Hello.
welcome to our small group .NET Learners House, and I really thank you so much for speaking from our group. To you, Nish.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure. I mean, it's a Saturday and everyone's here. That's really, really great. So are we starting early? I think we still have 10 minutes to go, right?
Yes, sir. We have 10 minutes. I thought Jagrati will take 30 minutes, but she completed. We don't have any queries on the YouTube channel right now. So
Okay.
I think we can start.
You want to start early?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll do that. So I'm going to share my screen and let's see if we can bring that up. Yep. Can you bring that into the screen?
Yes, sir. I did that. So let me pull myself out of the stream. So it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody at Hyderabad. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day today, Saturday. And my name is Nish. I work on the .NET team, specifically the community team. If you guys know Scott Hanselman, James Montemagno, I work for the same team. We kind of like, we want to engage with the community. We want to embrace a lot of feedback from the community and improve on things that we can make it better for you, right? So I specifically work on the .NET slash architecture. If you've seen the page, it talks about a lot of production ready, reference samples and documentation and guides, so that when you are deciding with .NET and you want to go build some great apps on the cloud or even on-prem for that matter, or you're modernizing something from your previous .NET framework to .NET Core, we have some really amazing guidances for you to get started with. So I work on that, and so I'll be happy to hear your feedbacks when you get a chance to just go through these guidances. There are like ebooks, for example. There are like a bunch of them. I'll show you some of them while I show some of the demos. And right, so you can actually follow me on Twitter, Nish Anil, Instagram, Twitter, everything, GitHub. It's the same handle. So feel free to reach out to me later if you have any questions. But I'm happy to take these questions on YouTube as well. So if you are watching live, don't feel sorry, feel free to actually type in those questions, and we'll be able to pull it in, and we'll be able to answer your questions as we go. Right. All right. So let's talk about resiliency in microservices and And when we talk about resiliency in microservices, let's first put everything in perspective, right? What are microservices? It is the new buzzword in town. Apparently, it's not new; it's been there for a long time. But because of the cloud and other things, we now hear a lot of people talking about microservices, and also because we hear a lot of consumer applications, so they are going with microservices and they're able to ship into production multiple times a day, unlike previously when we have to check in a code, wait for the release cycle to happen, test integration, and then finally package and then deploy. There's used to be a time frame for all these things. Now with microservices, we are talking about, hey, let's we have a new feature rollout, and let's roll it out by noon or something like that, right? So it just makes it easier for doing so. To do that, sometimes it is all about reimagining how you want to build your applications itself, right? So let's talk about microservices first, and then eventually we'll get to the resiliency, which is kind of more a topic that is very important as per microservices are concerned. But also that is only something, one part of it that we will be able to touch upon, because microservices is pretty large to cover in terms of the patterns and practices that you want to embrace to make your applications microservices. All right, let's talk about what are microservices. I mean, microservices are generally termed as microservices architecture. It states that your application is structured as multiple smaller services that focuses on a single business functionality, and that word business functionality focus is an important aspect, because it is not about splitting your application into smaller web API projects or something which you compile it into a Docker, or you package into a Docker and run. It's not that, right? Microservice is all about having a specific business focus, or in microservice terminology, there should be a bounded context through which you will be decomposing an application, and then deploying, right? And most importantly, they are focused by smaller teams. So every single team thinks of it as a service, as an application itself. That's why they're able to, and because they are loosely coupled, so they are autonomous, they can be independently deployed, so they can be shipped multiple, the features can be shipped out multiple times a day, even probably within few hours too, right? So depending on how your CI/CD pipeline is set up. Just to put it in perspective, we had these monolithic applications in the past, where we always layered the applications. For example, there were a data layer, there was a database, there was a data access layer, there was a services layer, there's a web layer, right? They all are layered all the time. But when you deploy this application, they are packaged into a single deployable unit, and then finally deployed into the multiple VMs, as you see here. And as you see, the scalable unit then becomes the VM. So if you want to scale your application depending on the demand, you're basically scaling the entire application as is. You can't scale a particular part of the application, which might be the need for the scale, but you can't do that because you need to scale the entire VM, because they are tightly coupled and they're packaged into a single deployable unit. Whereas in microservices, if you look at, even though they are layered, but they're also split by bounded context, and they have definite service boundary. So what that means is that you can take this application and you can actually deploy it to a number of VMs. They are independent. So some systems like orchestrators like Kubernetes can actually place your application in any number of VMs. It can have multiple copies, it can have multiple versions, and because they are decoupled, and as long as the service know how to reach out to another service for completing a task, like endpoint communication or asynchronous communication, it doesn't matter. The infrastructure doesn't matter, and you can actually scale. If you want a particular service to be scaled up, you can do that without really worrying about the infrastructure and things like that, right? And also it improves the resource utilization per service. Before we go further, let's talk about, is monolithic applications development bad? Because I think that's one concept that nowadays when we speak to customers, they feel that monolithic is an old way of doing things. Absolutely not, right? Monolithic and microservices, they are just the architectural choices that you make, right? For some applications, it may be really okay to go with monolithic application. It's totally fine. So like in monolithic, if you look at, you split in modules, but at the end of the day, you have a single database, a single relational database that you rely on, right? So that itself makes it easier for applications to work together, and kind of like data is in one place, and things like that. And it also means that, a single team can manage this entire thing. But if your application is complex enough and you have really large teams, that's when things will become extremely complex with monolithic. And that's when you probably want to look at microservices. And when you get started with microservices, it may look like it's getting into complexity, but that complexity will make sense if you are looking at a larger organization, larger application with multiple teams, and every team wants to focus on its own deliveries and things like that. That's when things all become much more easier. All right, talking a little more in depth with microservice architecture. Don't get overwhelmed with this diagram. This is one of the sample applications. We call it as eShop on containers. It's one of the popular reference samples out there, which shows how to build microservices. And you can take a look at this, but in reality, the production applications are even more complex than this, right? But we just wanted to show you how to build microservice application, or how do you get started? How do you start thinking about building microservices, right? To pay attention to these microservices on your right, there is an identity microservice, there's a catalog microservice, ordering microservice service, and very easily you can identify they are actually different business domains, right? They're not just simple web API projects, they're basically different domains altogether. And if you pay attention to one more thing, like each service has its own database, right? Remember in monolithic, we talked about a relational database having the kind of data from multiple services, which will depend on. But in microservice, specifically in this architecture, you will go with a pattern called database per service pattern, which is, you do not have a central databases which all the services will access to. You will have, every service will own its data. That means the other services cannot access that database. As for example, catalog can't access the identities SQL database, or order cannot access the cache of basket. If they have to access this data, they have to go through the service endpoints itself. So service endpoints will become the entry point for your business logic. And similarly, you will also have something like an asynchronous communication, right? Where, for example, you are in the order screen, order is complete. Now you want the payment microservice to pick up and then complete the payment. You do not call the payments microservice directly. Instead, you will notify it by using a pub/sub pattern. So that's where you see the event bus. You actually publish an event, and then whoever is responsible for completing that event will subscribe to that and then complete that. So that way, it is actually decoupled, and it also makes it easier for scale and other things, right? So you will use something like RabbitMQ or Azure Service Bus in production, so that you have high availability on this kind of event-based communication too, right? And each service, even though they have this endpoint, they may not be accessible outside for example, your web application or a client application to consume. Because when you have an endpoint, if you have, like, I'm talking about this, we are looking at some maybe 4 microservices here, but in reality, you'll have hundreds of microservices. So if hundreds of microservices start exposing their endpoints to the world, it would be difficult as a security mechanism to kind of like secure all these endpoints and keeping your data secure, right? So that's where you want to limit those access, and that's where you will come with a pattern called API gateways, right? API gateways kind of like decide. It's basically API composition pattern, but where you actually define what application the world, the external world, have access to the API gateway, and that gateway will have access to multiple services behind the scenes. So you kind of like restrict that. And for example, there is another pattern that you can implement there, which is called the backend for front-end pattern, which is like think of a mobile application where you have this real estate which has the basket, or when I say basket, I'm talking about the cart. And then where you have these numbers, when you add to the cart, you have those numbers up. And then there are other things like the orders and other things. But because that real estate is so small, you can't connect multiple times to get the data. Instead, you can probably connect to an API gateway, which will have a backend for front-end pattern implemented, which nothing but you'll have some aggregators. In that request, it will connect to multiple services and aggregate the data for you for what is meant for that mobile, and then send it to that mobile application, right? So you generally, what I'm trying to say here is, because they are decomposed into multiple services, you have to bring in some patterns to make sure everyone is on the same page, everything is done cleanly. So these are the patterns that is going to help you do that, right? Again, Patterns are very important, but at the same time it shouldn't be the ground rule for everything. Like, you are okay to break the patterns and other things as long as you're able to deliver values to your customers, right? So don't always stick to the pattern saying, okay, this is what it needs to be and this is how it needs to be done and that kind of things. Feel free to move things around and see what is viable for your business, and then implement things that way, right? So if you want to go into more details about this, there is github.com/.net-architecture. It's the repository where I work on day in and day out, where we have a lot of these patterns and practices and other things implemented, a lot of samples out there. So to feel free to check that out. And we're very happy to looking for collaboration. So if you are open source developers, you want to help us grow, make this project as one of those things. Like, if you want to bring in some of the practices that you have been doing with your customers, you want to bring in those practices, then feel free to drop an issue and we can discuss there, or send us a PR, and we'll be happy to look through that, review them, and merge when it is ready, right? All right, so now let's talk about today's topic, which is managing resiliency. Now, we talked about microservices, the decoupling of services, which means you have more communication between services, right? And that is exactly a problem it's in itself, because that in the world of cloud and in the world of service, chances are things can fail. And it's not that failure is something which you can avoid, right? We can't write code to avoid failures. But what we can write is, we can actually be more resilient in when a failure happens. How can we be more resilient, right? So that's the aspect that we will look at. And there are two important concepts in managing resiliency within microservices, and we will look at that. And I will talk about, like, how do you implement that in code, and how do you go and implement an infrastructure as well. Okay. So, for example, this is the example where we have this API gateway in between. All the clients are connecting to the API gateway, but the API gateway internally works with multiple microservices. So there is a microservice 1, microservice 2, microservice 3. So there is a client web API which is going to make a request to it. For example, you make an API gateway request, and that eventually connects to the microservice, right? And this is the place where it can have failures, right? For example, in this example, in eShop on Containers, we are using Docker and Kubernetes, right? For those of you who don't understand Docker and Kubernetes, I'll just put it in simple terms. Well, Docker is a company as well as a great tooling support to kind of create your applications, or package your applications into a single deployable unit, so it can have your your code, your dependencies, and also the operating system dependencies. So they're all packaged into a single image. So when you're running it, the Kubernetes system can actually take this image and run containers for you, like make the instances running, and then it will have the cluster open for you to accept requests and things. So we use containers and things. Microservices concepts are not very specific to Dockers and containers and other things, but it all makes sense because these cloud native tech makes life so easy and simple. So you may as well start using that if you haven't started to use that yet, right? So coming back to this, this is this is where we will be implementing two patterns. One of it is retry, and the other is a circuit breaker. So we will look at, for example, how do you, like, for example, okay, the reason why I brought in Kubernetes in this discussion is that in Kubernetes world, sometimes when these containers are running, there are chances for Kubernetes to kind of like kill your pod and then kind of move things around. Maybe it is losing the resources in one of the VMs and it wants to spin up another VM and move your services there. So this all happens behind the scenes automatically. In such a situation, there could be interim failures, right? So for example, like when there is a microservice 1 which is down for some reason, right? It could be anything. I gave it Kubernetes as an example, but then it could be anything, like your microservice is failing for some reason, right? So the client is actually trying to reach this microservice, and it makes a request, and the service is down, right? In real world, what happens is if you're part of a particular transaction, the chances that you will fail immediately. There is an error thrown and you don't know what to do, right? But when you start implementing a retry pattern, you basically, what you do is that whenever you make a client call, before you throw the exception, you want to retry that to make sure that it is not an interim failure, right? So you do a retry 2, then you do a retry 3, and then it becomes success. So all in all, the client won't even know that there was a failure behind the scenes, because you were in the middle retrying to make sure that the service comes back and you kind of like complete the transaction, right? And similarly, you can also implement another pattern called circuit breaker. Now, think of it like, when a server is running and it is going on getting requests, right? And you're actually retrying like a couple of times in a minute. And there are chances that you get a denial of service as well. Even though the service is down, you're hitting the servers. So you could hit a DOS. So that's why you will implement some more logic to make sure you don't hit it too much. And one of it is like exponential backoff, and the other is the circuit breaker. Exponential backoff is basically you make a retry, you wait for a few exponential times to do the next retry. So you wait for 2 seconds, maybe the next is 4 seconds, then next is 6 seconds. So you wait a couple of more seconds before you retry, so that you can decrease the amount of hits to the server. And similarly, when it comes to circuit breaker, basically think of it like a circuit breaker being a circuit in an electronic circuit, right? So when the circuit is complete, you basically make the request. When the circuit is open, you can't make the request, right? So that is what exactly it means in open and close scenarios in circuit breakers, right? So you make a retry 2, it's again down. In retry 3, again down. And then you will implement a circuit breaker. So what happens is the retry 4 will not even make a connection to the microservice 1, because it knows that it is still open. It's still down. So we will wait for some more time for the circuit to be closed, so that finally it can make a request, right? So we will wait, and then it will, after the retry, once it is all exhausted, we'll just then respond with a controlled exception. Okay, so we'll try and implement these things in my demo. I'm just looking at time. We had more time today, so that's why it's going slightly more slower. So we'll in the demo, we will look at a couple of things. One, so that everyone is on the same page, we'll try to put how do you build microservices in .NET using a really nice tool like Thai. And then I'll show you how do you build this circuit breaker. How do you build create policies for the retry, this exponential backoff circuit breaker using a nice library called Poly in .NET. And we'll also look at something called a service mesh that you can implement if you're using Kubernetes and containers and things. You can also implement this in infrastructure, and I'll also tell you why infrastructure-based resiliency would be more apt. And at the end of it, if you want to do a hands-on with microservices and AKS, Dockers and other things, I'll show you some of the modules that are free, and you can actually, take a laptop or even an iPad, sit 1 hour, and you can open the browser and you can execute the entire code. You don't need any kind of setup like VS Code or any IDE or any other setup is not required, because everything will be happening on the cloud. All that you need is a simple Azure subscription and access to internet with a browser, and you'll be able to complete this module. So which is pretty cool. So we'll look at that too. All right, so let's start with the demo. Meanwhile, just looking at questions. No, we don't have any. All right, so typical microservices world, right? So this is my microservices directory. So you have this backend, there is a front end, and then there is a service mesh. Ignore that service mesh folder for now. So let's open this in Visual Studio Code. I'll quickly show you. This is the backend application, and this is the front-end application, right? So backend application is, let me close all these things. So backend application is nothing but a simple weather service. Okay, let me close this too so that you can see this well. Simple web API project. If you just go to .NET new web API, this is what you get. It's a weather forecast controller. It gives you some random weather data, right? And the front end is simply an web UI project, which actually connects to the backend over here to the URL and displays that in the browser. So let's see how does it look like, right? So if I want to run this, what I do is generally go to backend and say, okay, this is my project. I'll just say .NET build and .NET run. In this case, I'll just do .NET run because it will do the build for me. So it's running on Finance 01, which is great. And then I'll go to the front end folder here and run the front end folder too, right? So now it's running on Finance 03. I click on this and it has come on this browser. So you can see that it's just a simple weather data that is it's actually hitting the back end, and it's just, as you refresh, it is giving some random value, right? Typical microservices scenario where you have more than one service you have to work with, which is quite cool. Now, did you realize one thing that, I had to go to multiple services to make it run? So you have to do .NET run at multiple places. Wouldn't it be nice if I'm able to run it all together? And that's where the tool TIE comes in picture, right? So this is called TYE. You can search for TYE, TIE, and .NET, and you'll get to the GitHub repo where you can. It'll give you instructions on how to install TIE. It's .NET global tool. So all that you need to do is just do a TIE, .NET install, and how you use the global tool, right? So same instructions and install it. So there's documentation on that. And once you do that, so let me make sure I'm in the main folder. So let me clear this off. So I'm in the main folder here. So I have the backend and front end. I also have this solution file. So I can just say TIE run. That's it. So now what it do is it'll look at your solution file and say, okay, there are 2 projects it needs to be running. They are all .NET projects. So it'll automatically start building and running all together. So think of it like if you have some 15, 20, 30 services that you want all to run together, TIE can make that happen. And like every other cloud native tool, TIE also gives you a nice dashboard. So I just clicked on it and it apparently comes on the other screen that I have. So here's there is services and things, and you can also see there's replicas. Like you can also scale this. Like for example, I want 2 backends, I want 2 front ends. You can do that too, right? So and also if you go into this backend, it also gives you this nice metrics on how your application is using things, right? And similarly, it can also give you logs. So if you go into the view, okay, there are logs about how your application is performing and things like that, right? And if you notice one more thing is it automatically it gives some random ports. So it looks at your application, your system, and sees what are the open ports available, and it assigns those ports so that your services don't have to really conflict on the port. So if you have more than one service and there are like a couple of them, you don't have to really hard code the ports because TIE will do this thing for you automatically. So now I can go and hit the front end service to see like, okay, what does it look like, right? Yeah. So we get this internal server error, and that is because we are trying to hit something called as localhost 5901. Apparently, we don't have a port like this because TIE has actually started the backend at 61799. So that means this port was hard-coded in our code, right? So let's go fix that. To fix that, what I'm going to do is go back to the VS Code, and wherever this 5901 port, wherever I'm doing a hard coding here, I'm going to comment this out and uncomment the code, which is configuration.get service, and says you can see this backend, right? Whatever is the service that is running in backend, get me that URL for it. Now, this configuration.get service URL is an extension method, which is part of a project called Microsoft tie.extension.configuration. So all that you need to do is just add this extension to your project, and then it will eventually find out the correct port for you. So now if I just go back and run, let me save this file. Sure, this is saved. Yes. So now I can just go and say TIE run, and I'll just use something called as watch, so that I don't have to keep breaking things down. So now it's going to go build these projects, and then if I click on it, and as again it opened on the other browser, which is fine, I refresh it, and it's all back in things, right? So this TIE is really amazing when you want to focus on your business logic and not really on the other things, right? All right, I broke this. Anyway, that's okay. So now let's go and do what else can TIE do, right? Wouldn't it be nice if I can actually implement a Redis cache into this whole stream of things? So Redis cache is one of the famous caching tech out there that you can use in your project. So like every microservice will have a backend for it or a backend database for it. So let's go and implement. So in this case, I'm actually going to implement that in the backend code. So if I go into the controllers, you see this, there is this random value that is getting generated. All that I'm going to do is, hey, I want to keep generating random, but I don't want to generate random for every request. Instead, I will keep a cache of every time I generate once. I will keep a cache of it. So I'm implementing iDistributed cache, and this cache will have the details that is needed for you to store into a Redis cache, right? And then it will just expire every 5 seconds, and then there will be a new value coming up, right? Now, if I go into the, let's say the startup.cs, this is where the connection string comes into picture. So you basically say localhost 637, and if you install Redis locally, you'll be using the port called 6379. But we're going to use Thai. So we'll ask Thai to get us the Redis connection string and use that. But then we have not implemented, even though we have the code implemented, we don't have Redis yet. So how do we bring in Redis, right? So the Thai makes this easier because you know that you can actually use Docker images directly. So why not just bring in the Docker images directly while working with this instead of installing it on your machines and taking care of the drivers and other things, right? All right, so let's do that. So to do that, what I have to do is I need to use something called as Thai init so that it gives me a configuration file where I can particularly configure these endpoints, right? So if you go into the Thai.yaml, let me close all these things. So you can see that, because we were just working with .NET projects, Thai was smart enough to know how to run a backend project or front-end project. But if you want to explicitly write, this is what you need to write. It's like a regular YAML file. Right over here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to implement the caching mechanism. So here you can see that I want Redis, right? And then in the image, I say I want Redis, right? So this is an image. As you can see, it is not a .NET project. So in this .NET project, we have project, but in case Redis, it's not a .NET project. So we say image. So Thai is smart enough to actually bring down this image from your Docker Hub and run it locally for you, right? Now, all that you need is a connection string, which is basically Redis colon 6379, which will be injected in when you ask for the Redis connection string, right? So that's all I did. Now, if I go back and say Thai run, and let's do watch now. And now it's going to give this judgment. But you can also see that, it actually had a couple of more steps for me, which is it says running Docker command, right? Running the image Redis. So that means it figured out we want to work with Redis. So it is going to pull in all the Redis related ones, right? If I go into the dashboard again, you can see there's a backend, there's a front end, and there is also Redis and CLI, which we can work with, right? Now I can go to the front end, open this thing, and there is an internal server error, right? And I'll tell you this is a deliberate error, but I'm going to refresh this. See, it's back on. Now, if I refresh this, it's error, refresh. But you pay attention to these values, it's actually cached. So that's 5 seconds. Again, refresh. There's no change in value because for 5 seconds, it is actually keeping that cache. So after 5 seconds, it goes away. But you also notice that there is an interim errors, right? There are errors that is coming in the way. What happened there? And that is because, it would be difficult for me to kind of like, show you a server error at a random point. So I am actually creating that error myself, like, in the code so that I can show you the resiliency part of it, which is, so whenever I do random and I get a random value, I throw an error. So this is to reproduce that error in production, which can be interim errors, right? So how do we handle this now? And that's what we're going to do. So I showed you Thai. I showed you how to run Thai two microservices together. I showed you how to implement a cache. Now we have errors in my production. So let's go and fix that error, right? To fix it, I talked about two patterns, right? The circuit breaker and the retry. So let's go and implement that. So the place where we want to implement is in the front end code because that's where we have the error that's happening because front end is calling the backend. So I have this HTTP client, and to this HTTP client, I can add some policies. Okay, I'll explain this in a bit. So this is my policies that I'm getting added. In this policy, there are two policies that I'm adding, which is the retry policy and the circuit breaker policy. And that is actually implemented down below here, get retry policy and get circuit breaker policy. For this, we're using something called as HTTP policy extensions. And this is part of a project called Poly. Okay, so you need to implement this, you need to have the Poly project added to your, this is a NuGet package. You need to make sure that you add it to your project wherever you want to implement resiliency, right? So let's go back to where we were. So I have the Poly. Now here, let me explain this to you. We are implementing something called as wait and retry. So this is going to be implemented in the HTTP client factory. So that means every HTTP client that it has to connect to whenever you're initializing for a weather client. So every weather client call, you have these policies implemented. So whenever there's a call to the weather client, we will have these policies implemented, right? So there's a wait and retry async policy, which is, give me a minute to get back to, okay. So there's a wait and retry async policy, which is basically, as its as it rightly says, you are waiting. Whenever there's an error, you want to wait for some time. And then here we are using some exponential logic to say, like, we don't want to retry immediately. If there is a failure, I want to retry after a couple of seconds. And how many times do I have to retry? And that is this number, like 5 times I want to retry, but exponentially I want to retry, right? So I implemented that. And I also implemented the circuit breaker, as explained earlier. So after 15 tries, we will make sure we will keep the circuit open for 15 seconds, so that we don't make any more calls, and we'll break the circuit, right? So that is the circuit breaker policies that we have implemented. Now, because I'm running .NET Watch, it should have fixed by itself. So let's go back to the dashboard and go to the front end. And now I can go and refresh it, and you will see that error go away, right? The thing is, we never, fix the error, but we handle the error gracefully because the system is down for some seconds. But the user will never know, and the reason for that is if you refresh it, sometimes if you pay attention to here, the progress bar that comes in. Let me refresh it. Okay, it's so okay. Now you see the progress bar. That is where the retry is happening behind the scenes, but the user will never know. So imagine the time when you're going to an e-commerce application, you're making a booking of the order and the payment failed. There's no better way to explain the nervous moment, right? Or not even the payment failed, probably. It is the payment has gone to the banking side and it never got back, right? We don't know what happened. So you don't know whether the payment is detected. You don't know what exactly happened. So imagine a situation like that where, I'm not saying that, payment has to be retried, but at least the calling client can actually query the status of it and wait for it, so that, there is gracefully, you're letting the user know what exactly happened, right? Either a payment failed, you need to retry the payment, or, you need to, payment is successful, so you're good with it, right? So you can implement those critical logics into your application. So you saw how I did this with the code implementation, which is the poly implementation, right? Which is fine. Now let's go and implement the same thing using a service mesh. So for that, I need to actually keep this code commented again, because when you implement this in a infrastructure like service mesh, you don't want to complicate things. For example, we will be implementing the same logic, but in a service mesh, and I'll explain service mesh in a bit to you, right? So now you understand, okay, this is how the policies, this is a pattern that helps in keeping your applications resilient. Now, implementing the policy, again, speaking about 2 ways. One is code, so which you're writing this in code. Now, imagine if you have hundreds and thousands of services, you're looking at implementing all of them in the code, right? That means you're actually even keeping these cross-cutting concerns and other things in the code, which may be difficult to maintain as well, right? So wouldn't it be nice if we can actually take these concerns out and not put in our services, our services should focus on business logic and take all these kind of things into the infrastructure side of things. So that is where something like service mesh is going to come into play and help us apply these policies at infrastructure level, so that the developer doesn't have to focus on this thing. Okay, we'll look at that too. Now, talking about service mesh, I'm going to use, there are multiple service mesh that you can use, like Linkerd and Istio. So I'm going to use Linkerd for that matter, because it's pretty nice. Again, to explain to you about service mesh a little bit, the way service mesh works is, it uses something called as a sidecar approach, wherein your application is running, but there will be a sidecar, which is another app. Think of it like another container working together with your application. And that container will take care of networking with other services. And that means when that container or that particular thing is focused on doing that, you can actually configure it to say, okay, what do you want? How do you want to do it? And also service meshes give you a lot more things like observability to see how your network is performing, where is it, and how things are, where are you failing, all those things, right? So I particularly like Linkerd because it's very, very simple and easy to use. And similarly, there is Istio too. So if you are comfortable with using Istio, you can do that too. So let's see how to implement this, right? For this, we need to deploy our application to Kubernetes, right? Kubernetes is an orchestrator where our application will be finally deployed. So right now I'm running everything in my local. So if I want to deploy this, and Tai also gives you this nice way to deploy this to Kubernetes, right? So let's look at how to do that. looking at questions right now. So the question, okay, let me bring this. Can you bring this question into the screen, Swami? Is circuit breaker and retry policy run in parallel? You're muted, Swami, if you're.
Oh yeah, I was talking on mute. One second. I'm bringing the question right away.
Yeah.
That's the one. Is circuit breaker and retry policy run in parallel?
Yeah, you would never want to do that in parallel because then it would not make sense, right? You want to do retry first because you want to make sure that the retrying is happening, and you want to break the circuit after certain retries. So that's what you need. So that's a policy. That's a middleware that you will handle it, right? So make sure that that is also one of the reasons why you need to be very careful in writing these policies, right? So from the servers, you do not know what point is the break, things can break and other things like that, right? Like where can you get the denial of service and other things. So that's why you need to be very sure and come up with a logic that makes more sense to your application and to your infrastructure. Okay. All right. So let's go to the next. So I talked about Linkerd. Before that, let me show you how to deploy this to Kubernetes. So let's say I use a tool called kubectl. I mean, we all have to use a tool called kubectl to know where we are with the Kubernetes. For example, if I want to know where is my cluster, I use something called as config and use a command called get context. This gives me what are the Kubernetes systems that I'm working with. For example, this one, Contoso API, I was doing another demo 2 days back for the Xamarin show, and I was deploying to the AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service. So Azure Kubernetes is like the orchestrator, and there are managed implementations of it like AKS, and Amazon has one, Google has one, like, right? You can choose whichever works for you. And I was using AKS because it's very straightforward, and we can deploy the code into that very seamlessly. So I also, like, when I'm working locally, I prefer to use the Docker Desktops Kubernetes. So I'll show you that too. So in Docker, if you install Docker in the settings, you also have an option called Kubernetes, right? So you can enable this. So locally while working, you can also use Minikube if you want to, and that is also totally fine. But I find this comfortable because it's just one place to handle all of this. And my demos are not with multiple clusters. It's mostly with a single cluster, node, not a single node, and then I deploy that to it, right? So I use Docker Desktop here. So as long as this configure is set up, so for example, you can see the star mark. So right now the current context is this. So I'm deploying it locally. So what I do to deploy this code, which is here, this backend, frontend, tie with Redis and other things, I also use something called a Zipkin to deploy. Like, for example, for distributed tracing, I can show you Zipkin, but let's see, how much time do we have? 12, 10. Okay, we do have some time. Let's implement Zipkin too. So I go to TinyYAML.
Yeah, we have half hour more, Nish, if you have the content till 12:30.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
I thought we will spend more time with the questions, but if we are getting very less questions, then
Yeah, you can. We got only one query. I think
Okay.
you can take up. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Let me just give me 1 minute to go to my free. So I need to make sure that I don't make any mistakes here with the typo or something. That's why I'm just trying copying pasting code. So I'm using an extension called Zipkin. So if I want to run this, I can now go to run. Remember, I added the Zipkin code. So you can see that it is also pulling in Zipkin as well, right? So Zipkin is for distributed tracing. For example, so you can see that Zipkin has come in. It's on 9411. So if I go to this thing, it automatically pulled in. And if I do a run query, there's nothing happening. So let's go and hit the URL here. refresh, couple of refresh, and refresh in the Zipkin. And you can see this, so this is the distributed tracing I wanted to show, right? So Zipkin is a tool which actually tells you much about your network, like, what exactly is happening, where are you making the queries, and things like how much time it is taking. For example, for the front end call the back end, so it took about few seconds to respond to it, right? So it will give you those information what you need to go ahead and fix and things like that, right? So if you also look at dependencies and go through it, right now there's back end and front end. That's all we have, which is great, but in reality, you will have hundreds and thousands of services. So Zipkin as a tool can give you that overall pictures and things like that, right? So that is the I was talking about how the observability comes into picture. So one of the key pillars of the cloud native apps is to making sure that you're able to observe that entirely. You have access to the logging, you have access to these distributed tracing and other things. So to implement this, what we need to make sure is in the code. Let me go to the program.cs. You have to use this activity.default ID format, activity.id.w3c. That's all you needed. And then Zipkin, so it enables open telemetry based on the W3C standards. The logs are, the trace is done. And now you can actually use any open telemetry tool, like Zipkin is one of the examples, and you can actually see it. And because this telemetry is done on this, we can also figure this out in our service meshes observability as well. Okay, so I wanted to show you one thing there, and finally, I want to take all these things and deploy it right to Kubernetes. So for that, what I'm going to do is let this come out and this and do a tie deploy and go in an interactive mode, and then go it'll ask you some of things. Okay, I noticed that you have a Redis in your YAML script. So what does your Redis connection look like? It'll ask you what is your Zipkin connection, because it finds Zipkin too, right? So once you complete it, what tie deploy internally is doing, it is also actually package your .NET application into a Docker. So you will have multiple images, like you have a backend image, you have a front-end image, and it'll also push it to a container registry, right? Those of you who are new to container registries where you will actually store your images, right? So once you package using Docker, you package your application into an image, and then container registries where you store that image, and then Kubernetes will pull that image from the container registry, which in this case is going to be Docker Hub for me. Okay, you can also use container registry like ACR, which is Azure Container Registry for that matter too. Okay, so now if you see, I have already done this. It takes a little bit of time. So to save time, I had already done that. So you can see that these are my pods. So it's already gone and deployed. So it has a backend, it has a front end. You saw the Redis, you saw Zipkin. So this is all installed now, right? The only thing that this code does not have is it does not have the poly implementation that I did. Okay, that means it will still fail in the production. So let's kind of reproduce that. So what I'm going to do is to access it, I'm going to use a command called port forward. My service is the front end that I want to watch. Front end, 5000 is okay, and port 80, right? So now it'll open the local port for me at 5000, and I can actually go into localhost 5000. And there you go. There is my application, right? I can refresh it, refresh it. I'm looking for that error. Oh, there you go. So we have hit the error in production. And because we are not running in a production environment, we are running in production environment and not a development environment, we don't see that error that we saw it earlier, right? It says that, okay, something has failed. So this is something like a scenario where things are failing still, right? So there's no poly code implemented, right? So now this is where we want to go and implement in service mesh, like a Linkerd. So now that all the pods are running in Kubernetes and other things, let's see how to do this in service mesh, right? So what I did is I installed Linkerd. See this. So I have installed Linkerd. I think it's this one. Yeah, I've installed this client and server version. So I have installed Linkerd on my server too. So as I mentioned, it's going to be a service mesh. So if you go to Linkerd, get started, you can actually follow these setup commands to do it. It's pretty easy. You do a Linkerd check pre to make sure that your cluster is good enough to go and deploy it. Most cases, if you're just not done anything with the Kubernetes cluster, it would be just straightforward deploy, and then use this Linkerd install command to apply this, right? That's all you need to do. So once it is done, you do a Linkerd check, and we're good to go. So we have installed service mesh. Now, you have to do one more step to make sure your services are also meshed. And to do that, let me show you directly my repository. So if you go to github.com/meshchannel on .NET, so this is the repo that I'm using. So for here, what I wanted to show you is this one. So once the Linkerd gets deployed, you can see that in your link, all these pods are actually running, and then you have to make sure that your front end, back end, and Zipkin, whatever you want to mesh it, you want to make sure that these things are configured correctly. So you use this get deploy front end, because tide deploy did not ideally in Kubernetes world. You will have a YAML script which tells you what is your deployment look like, what does it do, is it a service or is it any other kind. So you define all those things and then do the deployment. But because tide deploy does it automatically for you without all the worries, what I'm doing is I'm actually pulling out whatever Ty was using to deploy the YAML, and I'm injecting Linkerd into it and then reapplying that thing back. So basically the annotation is getting added. So now your application will be meshed. Okay. Now let's go and implement this. So you saw that I have implemented Linkerd. So let's go and go into the Linkerd dashboard. So now that I have meshed it, so I just see Linkerd with dashboard, I think. Where did it come up? Okay. Let's 50570. Make sure I think it just popped up somewhere and I'm not able to find the dashboard where it came. So I need to kind of hit the default. Yeah, there it is. I got it. Here it is. So you can see that, this is the default namespace where all my applications like backend and frontend are coming. So there is a backend, there's a frontend. And you can also see that, it says it's meshed, right? That means now the infrastructure knows about your application. So now it knows how your application is working. So if you go into these details, you can see there's a backend and frontend, there's a connectivity, right? But you can see the success rate is 100%. Let's break this down. So if I want to, see how the success rate is, I'm going to use something, a PowerShell script, to just kind of reproduce this thing. So port forwarding it. Yes, we are. So now let's do a while script to actually go and hit the server very often so that that error comes back, right? So I'll just wait for some time. So you can see that the success rate is now going down 97 because it is now erroring out at a couple of times, right? So there you get this nice dashboard to know, exactly what exact. So there you go. So it's 90.31 now. So, and this Linkerd dashboard also gives you this Grafana, another dashboard, which to actually go into details of it. So you can see this, it is at 77.42% success rate. It talks about the success rate, P9 file latency, request volume. You can also individually go into the deployment that you want to focus on. For example, in our case, the backend is failing. So you can see that this is where the backend stands. This is where application looks. So you can see that observability of as well, right? So we know, okay, now it's got reduced so much, right? So now we need to start fixing this up. So let's go and fix it up, right? So to do that, what I'm going to do is if I go to VS Code, in Service Mesh, I have this Linkerd, and there is this service profile. And I can actually provide my logic to handle resiliency. So all that it needs is basically is retriable is true. And then what it'll do is the mesh will take care of retrying it. There's no more, this is part of your code. It is part of your service mesh, right? And it also has its own algorithm, like it doesn't have the circuit breaker and other things like that, but you can also implement this kind of advanced retry budget scenario in Poly as well. But as I mentioned earlier, this is something which you have to decide on how, based on looking at your infrastructure and how much of failures are happening, you want to decrease those retrying logic, right? So here in this it says like the 20% of the total requests that you want to retry, things like that, right? So so that's it. I just say that, and I just go and apply this back into my Kubernetes world. So for that, let me go back to where am I right now? Okay, I'm in front end. So I'll go to the service mesh directory. You can use, there's also Linkerd code as well. So if you want to try the Linkerd, you can do that too. So now I have the backend service profile. So I have edited it to have the retry. So kubectl apply to my file system. The file that I have is backend service profile. So there you go. So it goes and configures it. Now if I go back to my localhost 5000, and you can keep refreshing, and you'll see that error has completely gone away, right? But if you go back to the dashboard, you will still see, okay, now it's back to 100%, but at some point you will also see it's failing as well, right? So you can see that it is not, we haven't fixed the error, but we have handled it well. So this is the kind of thing that you get in the world of cloud native world, where you have these dashboards and service to actually kind of monitor and see how things are working. So imagine I just gave you just one simple backend and front end code, but it could be like hundreds and thousands of it, where you want to know like how your application is performing in the cluster, and then specifically look at those errors and things like that. Okay. All right, so that's ends up my demo, but I would want to leave you with some few resources that we have. Okay, so let's start with .NET's website. So I'm going to open the questions here. Yeah, thank you for posting my URL there, the GitHub thing, Swami. All right, so this is the .NET website. So if you are just getting started with microservices, you can hit this microservices and then go to this get started section, right? So this gives you some good little details on what, if you're new to Docker and Kubernetes, it'll show you how to create your service with .NET. You have to install Docker, check how the Docker installation is, go to the metadata, add the Docker file that you needed, create the Docker image, run the Docker image, and finally, when you want to run it and deploy to AKS, you can go through these steps to kind of like do the AZ login, install the AKS CLI, create the Azure resources. So if you look at all of these things, it doesn't require you to install any VS Code or Visual Studio or something. All that it requires is just install .NET, Docker, Azure CLI, and then you're done. You can complete this entire course. So that's a very fairly simple getting started guide. But if you're someone, if you want to know more, like if you want to get to the details of architectures and things, that's where you want to hit this tab called architecture here, right? So go to this, and you can choose, if you're into microservices, you go to the microservices, and this is one of our popular books. You can go and download the PDF. So when you click on download, you can see that, there is absolutely no question on who you are, or you don't have to fill up forms and things. It's a free download, right? Just go ahead and download that. If you're someone who wants to read it online, you can do it with the view on the web. There are other books like Cloud Native, which is more about, we talked about Redis stacks, we talked about SQL Server. So if you are someone who wants to understand, like, okay, what database should I use, right? Should I choose between SQL versus NoSQL, right? Or things on Azure, like how do I implement Kubernetes based application on Azure? So there's implementation showing off AKS and everything. So this book specifically just focuses on taking a microservice app and then implement it on the cloud, right? There's also a very new book called Dapper for .NET developers. So I talked about service mesh, where a lot of cross-cutting concerns are moved to a service mesh where you're not writing everything into the code. Swami, do you mind putting it on mute, because I'm hearing a lot of... Okay, so there's Dapper for .NET developers, and that talks about, Dapper is an implementation which is called Distributed Application Runtime, which actually has a runtime for your cloud application. So all these cross-cutting concerns can be implemented there. For example, you want to work with a service bus, you can actually have a connector do that, and you don't have to write a lot of code. You just actually provide a binding to it and then implement that. So your lot of those cross-cutting concerns that you don't want to bake it into the code will get moved into Dapper, and you can focus on your code. So it's a really nice. You can try that out, and if you're new to it, just download this book and read about it. There's also this microservices learn module to do a hands-on. But before we go to that, check out this eShop on containers as well. Like, this is one of the popular samples out there, which talks about. So this is the eShop, as I mentioned. Like, the initially what I showed you. This is the implementation of it. But to just run it, all that it needs is, like, make sure you have Docker installed, do a Docker Compose build, and then do a Docker Compose up, and you will have these URLs ready for you to. And then you can actually start seeing how each and everything is implemented, go into the details of it. And it also has this nice wiki So if you are looking for more information on how to do CKRS, DDD, gRPC, API gateways, there are wikis, which is very relevant to eShop and containers that you can try it out. Okay, and then finally, what I want you to try it out. This is something which is recently we did it, which is ASP.NET. If you go to aka.ms, ASP.NET microservices. This is a very nice place to get started. So everything that I spoke about resiliency today is actually there in this module, like implement resiliency in a cloud. So let's go into this. So if you look at this one, let's get started. So you see that you actually copy something and put it in your Cloud Shell, and it will set up this entire eShop on containers for you, okay, on your cloud, in your AKS. Once you do that, then your job is to actually implement resiliency. So we have some failures that is happening. So it explains what is a circuit breaker policy, what is an infrastructure-based resiliency. So we also show about resiliency using Linkerd. And then, so now you see this is IP address, public IP, where it's all going to be deployed. And then you can see this is the application that you go and, it's all already on your system. Now there is some errors that is happening. So to show you how to see the errors using log. We are using sec and serilog for it. So you'll see about that, and then you'll go and implement how to implement these things using Poly, which I showed you right now. You can also implement it using Linkerd, right? So this is slightly more advanced so that you get a bigger picture of this. And let me go back. I would say if you're totally new to this, I would suggest you to start with this module, which is create and deploy a cloud native ASP.NET Core microservice, which technically is all about you as a production developer in a production. So if you want to say, okay, I want to implement a new service into the existing cluster, how do I do it? So in this module, you will actually learn about implementing a new service, right? Coupon microservice. So you can see that this is using MongoDB. And one of the good reasons of using microservices is this team who's managing Coupon can decide what technology they want to use. They can use Node.js, they can use Java, they can use anything here, and they can use whatever database they want, right? And then you will actually learn about how do you actually finally connect them all together, right? So think of it like you're a developer who are going into this microservices world in production, where already there is everything set up for you, and you are implementing something new. So you will see about integrations and things like that. You will see, even though we slightly speak about DDD, which is domain-driven design, how do you design your microservice based on the bounded context. But in this scenario, we are using this as more like a CRUD operation. For details on DDD and things, I would suggest you to go refer the book. Okay, so that's about it from me, and I'll leave you with my handle. That's Nish Anil. So if you have any questions later on, please feel free to reach out to me. All right. And if you have questions now, I can take them now.
Nish,
Yes.
if you don't mind, could you please post that URL where you showed about that ASP.NET microservices one? It's
Yes.
this guy is
This one, right?
a pretty good resource.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to post it into the chat here,
Yes, sir.
and you can. I'm not able to post it in the comments.
I will. Yeah, I'll do that. That's pretty good. I mean, this is inspiring me to go ahead and try this.
You should.
For
You
sure.
should, and let me know how this is, because these are things which was recently built, and we have more coming soon.
Oh, sure. This is pretty interesting, and I think all the queries has been clarified, and this is pretty good. The project tie and the Linkerd, the distributed logging systems. I see. I correlate this with New Relic. Long ago, I worked on the New Relic. It did the similar thing. When you hit a request, it shows the UI and the middle tier and the SQL server, and it shows the hard path. So is it similar to that?
Yeah. As I mentioned, you can use any distributed tracing frameworks for that matter, right? Zipkin is one of the things that I showed you. Even in Service Mesh, there is observability, and it talks about tracing a little bit. So you can use that. So whatever works well. And the good thing about these things are they are open standards. So which means you can have a .NET application and Node.js application communicate with each other, and you can still see the trace of all the things, right? And you can implement correlation IDs in logging, so that even though they are from different services, they can also be correlated into a single stream request, and you can figure those things out. So technically what I'm trying to say here is, when you're implementing cloud native, if you keep attention to these things, you can easily implement with alongside the other cloud native technologies out there.
Oh, I really like this. So if I have a correlation ID and the UI is hitting the .NET Core API, and
Mhm.
this .NET Core API is calling the Node.js,
Yeah.
Node.js talking to MongoDB. So I can use a
Yep.
single correlation ID to get the history, what happened with this call.
Correct. Exactly. So for that, I actually would suggest you to go back to the ak.ms ASP.hyphen microservices, and there is something called as instrument a cloud native app. So you see this module.
Yes,
So
sir, I
this,
do.
yeah, so this talks about logging and monitoring, reviewing logging and monitoring concepts, and it talks about structured logging and talks about correlation, transaction ID, correlation ID, and how do you actually kind of like take the correlation ID and construct your entire request back. These are the times when you have multiple services running and you made a request, something is failing, but you really want to collect everything together back in the place, right? So you can actually use these things to do that using correlations IDs and things like that. So yeah,
Wow.
it doesn't have to be a .NET app. It could be anything because these are all open standards now.
True, true. I was working on that eShop on contest, very small pull request, not a big one.
Okay.
2 3 lines of pull request. I did it quite a few. Now I need to start working on that eShop on Blazor. I pulled
eShop
it to my
on
local
Blazor or eShop
Blazor.
on Dapper? Okay.
Oh,
So
eShop on
yeah.
Blazor. I saw
Okay.
you and other two people are the owners of that.
Right. So
Yeah.
basically, we own this. So I PM this. So anything
Mm,
that you have, you want to help us contribute and make this better. So as you rightly say, like, we keep eShop as this crux of it, so that someone who's getting started with one can kind of easily understand the other. So
mm.
there is Blazor, there's Dapper, there's like simple web application that talks about clean architecture and other things. There's modernizing. If you're modernizing from a .NET framework, then you want to containerize it and move it to cloud. gRPC for WCF developers and things like that, right? So yeah, feel free to like look at these things and help us make this better for you.
Sure, sir. I in eShop or containers, I liked that thing when we initially had HTTP calls and then
Mhm.
APIs with HTTP calls. Then that got converted into HTTP client factory, and
Mhm.
then moved into gRPC mix of HTTP and gRPC, and again a single helper class is
Mhm.
communicating with multiple gRPC. We are passing
Yeah,
the function as a parameter. I seriously
correct.
like that.
Implementation.
Seriously, sir,
So,
I seriously
yeah,
like that implementation.
yeah. So here's the thing. I think those of you who are joining uh, us and who don't understand gRPC, I think I'll just explain a little bit. gRPC is like a RPC framework. Like it's predominantly like now become the de facto RPC framework that you want to use. It basically gives you faster performance, but every transaction that you do is on binary level, so it's faster. But unfortunately, it's not readable by humans, right? So you need clients to work with, and you would work with a definition, like there's a contract between a client and the server when you're connecting. There's a protocol list. If you've worked in WCF in the past, you know that what contracts are, right? So service knows what, so the client knows what the service methods are, and then it makes those calls, right? So it's something like that. So we actually, when we looked at gRPC, we had a lot of API gateway to calls like identity catalog and ordering happening behind the scenes, and we want to improve the performance in that area, and that's what Swami was talking about, where we implemented gRPC for all internal communication, because we can keep gRPC for even external communication, but the world is still on REST, and a lot of people still want to communicate with REST. So we have opened that in the REST for the world, but we use something called as an Envoy proxy, which will take that REST client and then have those RPC calls internally and things like that. So that's what Swami was explaining about the way we implemented that.
Sir, I have one more query, if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I was doing one of the experiment for Swaminathan's group session. We all
Okay.
spoke on Jan. So
Yeah.
for that, I was doing a comparison between what if a API endpoint which exists in API. REST API and an endpoint which exists in gRPC. The same number of records I was bringing in, and I was doing
Mhm.
the benchmark. I did a benchmark on that one. So while
Okay.
doing that, what happened is at some place I was getting a close call. The REST API was almost 1 or 2 seconds faster than the gRPC. Then I read that for gRPC you need to have a large content to show the difference, but I see the content when I see it in the browser. The JSON is longer, like it is 2K, and the gRPC content comes around 980 bytes. So half the content, the size is pretty much an improvement. From the time perspective, it was almost a close call, or sometimes the API was winning. Then I increased the number of records to 30,000. It was then the GRP was winning. So I was a little bit greedy and I increased to 40,000. Then it started throwing an exception. Then I went into the Microsoft Docs where it mentioned that the max message size is 4 MB, and we can go ahead and bump up that to a different number. So and also they said that be a little cautious. If you bump up, that might negatively impact the memory. So what is the guidance around all these things? So what kind of POCs or the tech feasibility I need to do before choosing gRPC over this one, and some on that guidelines?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we need to get to the specifics of what we're sending, and for example, it also has these streams that you can open and keep sending it instead of sending it one shot and other things which you can optimize to. So we'll have to look into the specifics of it. So what I would suggest is send me an email with what you're facing, then I'll connect you with the PMs who are working in gRPC so that you can work with them directly to figure what would be the right use case for your thing. But as you rightly said, when you compare it, you have to compare with the large sets so that only then it'll even out when you're working with binaries and other things, right? We have seen like a lot of people moving to gRPC and having a great benefit of performance with that. So in your case, we have to look at the specifics of where you probably can optimize. For example, one of the thing is you can actually, just like IHTTP client factory, you can actually have a factory instance so that you don't have to reuse those things. You don't have to reallocate memories and things like that can be optimized. So we'll have to look at those instances too.
Oh yeah, I clearly tell the issue when it is an API. I'm getting the records and I'm directly spitting the DTO or entity class. Whereas in gRPC, I get the entity or a DTO class. From there, I need to convert back to the gRPC. So I had to go ahead with the automapper, and that is an enumerable of records. And while traversing that, it was taking time. So that's where gRPC was losing. I was losing
I
track
see,
there.
okay, I understand. So what you're saying is the DT object is different from the model that you write in gRPC for you.
Yes.
Okay. We'll look at that. I mean, send me those details, and then, or you can directly work with the team, gRPC's .NET project on GitHub itself.
Yeah, sure.
By the way,
I
think
pushed it.
we are over time with. We may have to
Yes,
bring
sir.
in the next speaker, right?
Yes, sir. Rajat is there. I really appreciate and thank you so much for your time on this weekend. And I personally learned many things, and I was able to correlate. And I have some action items in this. Really appreciate it, sir.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. Right. Take care.
Thank you
Have a
so
good
much.
conference rest. Bye.
Bye. Let me introduce the next speaker, Rajat.
Hey, hi everyone.
Hey, Rajat.
I'm
Could you
audible?
please share your screen? Yeah, you're loud and clear.
Yeah, thanks.
Are you on speaker?
No,
Okay, I was able to hear myself. Okay,
okay,
it's all yours, Rajat. I'm pulling myself out.
okay. Thank you everyone. Thanks Nish for wonderful session, and thanks Swami for bringing this communication. So let me start with the current session today. We are starting with SQL Server 2019 because we already skipped 2020. We don't have 2020 because of Corona, so we are discussing this in 2021. So let's start. What is here? So we are going to understand the agenda is what is new feature in SQL Server 2019. Obviously, like this is one of the things as you in the software field, as you grow year by year, you will find something new, and definitely those new things always come up with some good features. So we will discuss those things, and so let's start it. So the first thing is like intelligent query processing. So we understood, like in this era of machine learning, you will heard a lot of times like machine learning, artificial intelligence, and everything. So why SQL Server leave behind with this? So so let me show you this. Like this is the intelligent flavor of SQL Server. So they actually it started from 2017, but in 2019 it's got more increased. So if you see with the color difference, like intelligent query processing, which have adaptive query, table variable deferred compilation, batch mode, row store, and many more. So we will discuss a couple of things here one by one. So let's me jump directly into this, the first feature, which is memory grant feedback. So before jumping into that, let me pull my SQL Server. The first thing which you need to understand, although like whatever I'm sharing, that would be all thing would be available on my GitHub repo. So do not need to worry about this PPT and the scripts and everything. The first thing you need to understand, like if we are having a database which is decide on 2019 whether that is compatible or not. So when you run this select star from sys database, so basically this six database giving you all the database and their compatibility level. So if you see here like 150, 150, 150, which means it is compatible with SQL Server 2019. And here is 130, so it's a 2016 database. So in case if you want to change this, what you need to do, you just need to run a simple command, which is alter database, your database name and compatibility level. Run it. Your first thing is done. Okay. Now, what is memory grant? So let me tell you this. So whenever you are running any query, obviously you need in the background there would be some memories, some CPU will be played an important role, like for every query there would be query plan, and this SQL Server engine itself define like, okay, this particular piece required this much memory, this and this particular piece required this much memory. But sometimes it happened, and you might seen that. I will show you in this example as well. So that example give you like information like how earlier before 2000 implementing this intelligent query, what actually was happening. So like it is like sometimes like query engine giving more memory, sometimes it's giving less memory. So in both the cases, like it is like a slowness of the store procedures. So I hope you understand the crux. Like so, like in Sanskrit it says like ati sarvatra varjayat. So similarly, in the memory context also, like you can say like if you give the exceed memory, it is always be harmful. Although that particular piece might run fast, but it will impact other resources also. And if you give the low memory, then definitely your temper spillover will increase. So let me bring my example. So we already done with this. Let me close it. Okay, memory spill. The first thing like which we'll do, so in my script, I whatever I'm doing, I wrote everything is step by step. So do not need to worry like how to run it. Everything is mentioned clearly. You just need to do this thing. So firstly, we will change because as in the previous script, we make the compatibility level to SQL Server 2019. So let me change it back. So I've changed it to 130 means 2016. Now, what we are doing, like if you see, sorry, I need to run the memory grant, sorry. So yeah, so although the first three steps is almost same for everything. Okay, now let me include the actual plan over here, and when I run it, oh sorry about that. Good. Now when I run it, so what this query is doing, basically it's a simple query which is like doing the customer ID, customer purchase number, or internal comment, everything from the orders table and joining with the order lines. When you see the execution plan, you will see a yellow icon over there, and here if you see on the bottom of this where I'm highlighting this warning, the query memory granted detected excessive grant, means if you go with it, so if you read this sentence more, like the 73312 kV final is and used is 5872, means the SQL server provided more memory than the expected. So, and you might be thinking like, what happen if we run it again? So let me run it again. Again, same thing will happen definitely. Again, yellow marks. Okay. So with this new feature which came into this adaptive query or intelligent query, what happened actually? So we already I converted now the database into compatibility level 2019. Now let me run it with the same actual function. So the query is same. Okay, I ran it. Oh, you might be seeing like, okay, the query is still showing the icon as memory granted. Let me rerun it. Let's see now. The icon went out. So the reason behind it, in the first time, like it's like a kind of model which understood, okay, this in the first run we are giving this exit memory to this particular query. So in the second run, the SQL server understand, no, we do not need to give the access memory for this particular piece. Just cut off whatever is required, we will give that. So in the second run, the exact memory is given to that particular piece. So going forward, it will not create any issue. So I hope you understood how the memory exclusion or memory feedback is again used by this adaptive query to make your query performance well and minimize or give the exact memory which is required. Okay, let's move into the next topic. So we understood the memory grant related thing. The next thing is like adaptive query. So what is adaptive query? So if I hope you people are aware of the joins. So you know the inner joins, outer join, left outer join, everything you are aware of. But internally, when you do a joining, also the SQL server internally doing some other you joining like hash join, merge join, or nested loop join. So sometimes what happen, like the query plan select those join operation also with a wrong assumption, because query plan just calculate the runtime and just go with it. So sometimes this join, like where we need to choose like the hash join, it is choosing that nested loop join. And sometimes where we need to choose like the merge join, it is choosing some hash join. So kind of there might be some issue with this query plan, that it was not giving the exact result or exact join which we need to adopt. So with the SQL Server 2019, we are like we are in the mode like where we can think like, okay, this is the join which is required. So let me jump directly into the store procedure or SQL statement. So the first thing which we need to do, let's use this database and met the compatibility level again, reduce the compatibility level. The reason behind it, like we need to test like what was earlier. So let me select it and include the plan over here and then run it. So what this query is doing, it's a simple like in the order line, same customer ID, quantity and unit price, 3 columns we are fetching. If we see over here, so it is doing the hash join over and the cluster index and then index scans. So pretty straightforward. So you might feel like, okay, everything looks good, there is nothing. Okay, now what we are going to do, let me change it to compatibility level 150, which is SQL Server 2019, and then again rerun the same query. Now instead of hash join, there is a new join type came, which is adaptive join. And if you see over here, there is now, instead of scan, we are using one more index seek. So obviously that would improve the performance. So earlier we were doing scan, now we are doing the seek. So instead of row by row, now it's a kind of seek operation. So in this way, obviously the query performance will increase and your client would be happy. Now let me move to interleaved execution. So what it is basically, so I'm pretty much sure you people use table value functions most of the time, and you might be used those function inline also. So in such cases, there is a bug. I can say like there is a bug into SQL Server. Like for every estimation from the table value function, it always retrieving the estimated number of row 100. Before 2017, everything like when you run this table value function, and so it will always return the value estimated row 100. It might be possible that function returning more than 100 rows or more, less than 100 rows. That depends upon your tuple value function. But before like this interleaved execution, the value is always 100. So that is kind of bug which is fixed with this SQL Server 2019. So without wasting time, let's again move to the SQL Server. Okay. Now let's go to interleaved function. Let me set the compatibility level again, because we need to check this function against previous versions. So here, this function you need to create. I hope I already created this, but let me rerun it. Yeah, it's already created. No worries. Now what we are doing that, so what this function is doing, basically we are providing the invoice line, we are giving the quantity, and it is returning a table who's with the invoice ID, line ID, quantity, extended price from the invoice line where quantity is greater than that particular quantity which we are passing. So suppose we are passing 50, so it should return all the values from say invoice line whose value is greater than 50. So let's run it, include the actual plan to understand the things better. Okay, so if you see like how many rows are returning over here, 36,587. Okay, but when you go over here and you see this table value functions, so here if you see in the detailing, estimated number of rows per execution is 100. So That is one of the bug which is fixed in SQL Server 2019. So to check whether that thing is working or not, let me rechange the compatibility level and rerun the function with the actual plan again. When I run it, now let's see. So if you see now, the estimated number of rows per execution is 62,070. So you can understand, like with the previous one, because you are already having the constant 100, which is like a wrong value all the time, so your estimation of memory grant and everything would be definitely is going to be wrong. Now with this specific feature, this particular bug is fixed, so you can have the accurate value due to which your entire plan would be come accurate with the accuracy, and you can do your performance work better. So let's move into the next thing, which is batch mode on row stores. So I believe like you understand the column stores, and that is like introduced quite long ago. And so similarly to the column store, we have now row store. So what it means, like instead of like, because SQL Server is not made for like processing row one by row. It always it should process actually, and the objects or rows into batches, which will improve the performance. And when we are talking about this row store batch on the batch mode, is definitely going to give us good performance in terms of when we are executing the data on OLTP kind of database. So without wasting time, let me jump directly into the example. So let me close it, and again let me change the compatibility level. So if you see over here, this particular piece, so what in this, like we are doing the aggregation kind of thing for the invoice line. The table is same, the database is same. The only thing is like we are doing the aggregation according to the invoice ID. When we run with the actual plan, let me select the actual plan and run it. So obviously the data came fast. It's good. Now, so if you see this cluster index, so the actual execution mode and estimated execution mode is row by row. Means it is doing the row by row operation instead of batches. So definitely it is slowing down your performance up to some context. So how to improve that performance? You just need to make it compatible with 2019. That's the only thing which we can do right now. And with this new feature of SQL Server 2019, it automatically resolve that issue. So now if you see, when after the logical operation, the actual execution mode is in batch, and estimated execution mode in also in a batch. So now, so you understand, like instead of row by row operation, what we are doing now, batches operation. So suppose there are thousands or millions of rows. So what we are doing, instead of processing row by row operation, we are doing like in the set of 10,000 or 20,000, 1 lakh, depending upon like the internal logic. So that's what we are doing. So obviously that is going to give you a good performance. Okay. Now let me jump into the next thing. Okay. Accelerated database recovery. This is one of the interesting things. Like before going into example, let me explain it more. So when we talk about this accelerated database recovery, you people might face this challenge, like you are running a large transaction from your ASP.NET code and everything, and all of a sudden if something got failed, and and you want like to kill that particular process or kill that particular SQL statement, you either roll back or you might go and kill that particular SPID. So what happen in such cases? It would take time, definitely, and sometimes your database goes into recovery mode also. It happened many times to me. I'm running like more, I'm inserting in a table like 4 lakh records, and all of a sudden I realized no, this is a wrong record which I'm updating. I stopped, I killed, I'll roll back everything, and it goes into a recovery mode. So this is one of the thing. So how to prevent or use that thing with the SQL Server 2019? Let me show you that example also. So if you see, like before, like this recovery mode, just giving a few more insight. Like it is firstly like if you are saying okay, just roll back it. So the SQL Server is doing the analysis and then redo and undo that, those kind of steps they are doing. Now with the ADR, what is happening, like they are doing in internal system, they are using the persistent version store or logical revert steps. So like when you are saying okay, roll back, it would not take much more time, it would immediately will do rollback. I will show you in this example. So let me firstly use this database, okay, and make this wide world importer. So accessibility database accessibility recovery mode off. Oops, sorry, I did a mistake. So for this, firstly close this and go to masters, then try. Okay. So this is one of the key, like you don't need to set the, when you are using, don't run that command, otherwise that would hold screen. So now what we are doing, we are executing this particular piece, and if you see over here, it's just updating an invoice line with extended price of 1000. We have begin transaction, but unfortunately or fortunately, we are not adding the rollback or commit transaction. We are explicitly using begin transaction. Let me run it. It would take few seconds to run. Okay, so everything is updated, and now let me do a rollback. See how much second it's taking. Approx 6 seconds. Okay. Now again, let me go back to masters. Or choose any other database and make this feature on. It's on now. And choosing this database and rerunning this statement again. So same statement, begin transaction, no rollback, no commit transaction. We are just running it. So similar to like the previous step, it is taking a same time approx to insert this, update those statement. Once that is done, so once that is done, So in previously, when this feature was not on, it took almost 5 to 6 seconds. Now let's see. In 0 second, it roll back. So you understand, like if your transaction is like a huge transaction which you want roll back, it definitely going to take, like if you're updating 30 lakhs row in one shot, then definitely that rollback would take time. But if you are using this accelerate database recovery, it take few seconds and you are good to go. So you do not need to worry about like how much it would take. So this is one of the good feature. And now let me jump into another topic. So we already understood. So the other thing is like with the SQL Server, now you can use the Java language as well. So SQL Server is no more SQL Server query languages nowadays. You can use Python, you can use R, you can use C# also. Now with this extension, you can use Java language also. And to make it enable, what exactly you need to do, let me show you. So you firstly need to check, like obviously you need to install the things like for the R package or Python package or Java package, you need to install at the time of installation. But on the same time, this is one of the things which you need to check, like external script enable. Until unless you will not enable it, it will not work. So if you check this sys configuration and search for this particular key, external script enable, if it is enable, then it would be okay. So now the value is 0. So it means like the Java or Python or R you can't use. To make it enable, you need to run this command, which is sp-config external script enable, and value is equal to 1. So it's a key value pair kind of thing. Once you run it, you can use the JavaScript, not JavaScript, Java, Python, and R. Okay. Now let's jump into the new. This one is very interesting. So UTF-8. So UTF-8 is the most popular kind of thing nowadays, because whatever nowadays we are using in the website side also, that this UTF-8 character is start using. So it does not means like you are losing nchar, varchar, nothing. Nchar, varchar, the data type would be remain same. But if you remember, like for the data type, this n varchar or varchar data type, it's actually using the 2 bytes. So if varchar is using 1 byte, so is n varchar using 2 bytes. So in such cases where you have a large number of rows in a particular table and everything is using the n varchars, so you might think your database space is going to be filled pretty soon, because this n varchar obviously it is consuming more memory. So in such cases where with this SQL Server 2019, the internal format is now using the UTF-8. So where n varchar and nchar were using 2 bytes, instead of they are going to use 1 byte. So that will resolve your space issue. So this is one of the good feature. And now let me jump into user-defined inline function. So this is also an interesting thing. Let me pull that thing. Okay. So I hope by the name you understood like what is it is. So when you talk about user-defined execution function, so suppose you are calling something in the inline function you are calling, and when you execute that function, so that execution is count was like ignored earlier. Means suppose you called a function, and that function is just giving you like the combination of your first name and last name. So every time you will get the value 0 or null for that particular piece. So you do not understand like what is the function states for that particular piece. But with SQL Server 2019, you have the feature by which you can actually know how much the execution count is. So let's understand this by an example. Okay, so let me choose the database and drop the sales function and recreate. So this function is what it is doing basically according to the total sales. So it is giving the grade, like it is like a gold medalist or silver medalist or platinum kind of thing. Okay, now let me change the scope of this. So this is the particular piece which you need to set piece equal scalar UDF inline. Let me run it, and to make sure like there is no cache or nothing, I am running this command which is clearing the procedure cache. So the cache is clean and function is created. Now what we are doing, we are calling this function. So what we are doing here, we are calling this in function inline sales person grade. So we are passing the person ID over here. So what exactly it will return? So this query will return the full name, email, and the category, whether it's that person is in bronze category or silver or any other. To check like the iteration, how many iteration is taken by this function, it is showing no rows, means there is no iteration is taken. Is that possible? No, because if you are running that query, you already aware like how many rows are created. So suppose there are 1,000 rows, so this particular function will run 1,000 times. That is obvious, and it should be. Now let me make it off. And rerun again, clear the cache. So same result, and now rerun it. Okay, so previously, let me retry this. Previously, this execution count was as is, means like if you are not using SQL Server 2019, so when you call this inline function, it will call the statements or function 1,000 times. But with this new feature of SQL 2019, when you call this function, it would be treated as a scalar value. So there would not be call happen. So it will definitely going to improve the performance. Okay, let's move into the next step. Kubernetes. So as in the previous session also you heard about the Kubernetes. So this is a buzzword nowadays, like what is Kubernetes and what is pod and everything. So Nish also explained uh, how to deploy the Kubernetes system. So similar to the Windows application side or .NET side, now with the SQL Server also you can implement the Kubernetes. So for that, what exactly happened, like you have the same kind of structure. You will define operator which basically deploy or upgrade your orchestration, and then you have the config map basically which persists the states of the application SQL Server. And everywhere like we are using like in each node we are using the SQL Server. So basically this is more related to a high availability or disaster recovery. So if one node is failed, or it automatically shift to another node, and in the background, according to Kubernetes logic, it again create a cluster node. So that is a kind of a good feature which came into the cluster Kubernetes with SQL Server. So till now, like with 2017, we are able to run the SQL Server on the Linux, and in 2019, with this Kubernetes feature, the SQL Server can be deployed on different nodes, and that can be handled with high availability or disaster recovery. So far so good. Any questions so far? Do you have any questions? No. Okay, no worries. So with this feature, like the Kubernetes feature, this ends the SQL Server part. So this is about me, and we will discuss it more. Let me jump into another thing. But before going into the another thing, this is one of the resource which you can try. So this is the database which I am using, Wide World Importers, and all the script would be available in my GitHub repository. So thank you for SQL Server attention. Now we'll jump directly into another session which is related to the Power BI. Okay. Just give me a moment, please. Hey, Swami, are we on time?
Hey Rajat, you have 5 more minutes.
You have 5 more
Yeah,
minutes.
so you
Okay.
can.
So,
Ritika said
so
starts
in
at
5.
1:15.
Okay, so I don't think in 5 minutes I can give that thing in detail.
Yeah, we'll
But
ask Ritika if she's okay. If you need 10 minutes time, if you want to stretch, we'll ask Ritika.
Hey, Swami.
Okay.
Hey, so is it fine if Rajat takes 5 minutes more or so?
Sure, Swami.
No, I think it would take more time.
Oh, is it?
15 to 20 minutes. Yeah. So let Ritika continue. All then from my side then.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Cool
you.
then. Cool. So really, thank you so much Rajat, for your wonderful session. Really, we appreciate
Thanks.
your time. Cool.
Thank you.
So let me introduce our next speaker, Ritika. Ritika,
Hey,
could
Swami.
you please share
Yes,
your
Swami.
screen? Thank you so much for your time on this weekend.
No problem. Okay. So I just shared my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
Yeah, I have flashed it. I'm pulling myself out of this. It's all yours. Thanks so much, Ritika.
Thank you, Swami. Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone to the .NERS Learners House. In this session, I'm going to talk about what Canvas components are and how they can be used to enhance the capabilities inside your Canvas apps. I'll cover a little bit on the background side of it, as well as we'll look into how this can be used and deployed inside different applications and how this can be reused across multiple applications. Before we start, a little bit about myself. I am Ritika Agarwal and I work as a Power Platform team lead with Applied Info Services India Private Limited. Along with this, I am also the UG leader for Hyderabad Power Apps and Power Automate user group, and I am a Microsoft MVP and MCT for business applications. If you want to connect to me, you can reach me out on LinkedIn, Twitter, and I have also mentioned my email ID here. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, related to the platform and overall. Apart from this, I have a personal blog, agrawalritika.com. This is a place where I like to post about the learnings that I have, learned throughout my journey on the Power platform. So if you are stuck anywhere, you can check my blog out, and if you need separate help, you can reach out to me on any of the social media platforms. Now, let's talk a little bit about what Power Platform is and how we can leverage it to build modernized applications and share it across our organizations, or even create Power Apps portals if we want to share those applications with the external users. For those who already are familiar with the Power Platform stack, I'll just quickly take a minute to introduce the Power Platform for those who are just starting on the platform and trying to learn more things about it. So Power Platform is a medium which provides you to build out applications following the terminology of low code, no code. In this, you can create different type of applications, and there is an in-house database which can be used. It is called Microsoft Dataverse. So with the help of all these components, you can create full-fledged applications and use them in your day-to-day perspective. So other components also include like Microsoft Flow, Power BI, and components, virtual agents. Those can be used in different use cases. So an example could be a Microsoft Flow can be used to automate your process and perform automations which does not require any manual intervention. But let's say in a case you want to show visualizations or plot, graphs or track progress based on the data which you have stored in your database. In that case, you can work with the Power BI and build out reports and charts, and share it across different people. Or if you want, you can use it inside your apps as well. In this session, specifically, we are going to talk about Canvas components and what are those and how we can build one to make our apps more user friendly, as well as extend the capabilities of the existing configuration, or what we call as out of the box functionalities. So let's first talk about a little background of in which cases or in what kind of applications Canvas components are supported. So in the Power Platform stack, you can have three different kind of application. One is the Canvas app, the second one is model driven app, and the third one is Power Apps portals. So the Canvas and model driven app, they are specifically intended for internal users, or someone who exists in the organization's Active Directory. But with the Power Apps portal, it expands to external users as well. So that application can be shared with any person using a URL. If we talk about the Canvas components, this kind of component is specific for Canvas apps. So Canvas apps is a medium or a kind of application which has a blank canvas. Blank canvas as in a white screen will be provided to you, and you can drag and drop controls on it and write logic behind it. For example, let's say I want to have a button on my screen, and as soon as a person clicks on it, it creates a record in my database and sends out an email. But let's say I want to carry out this functionality at 10 different places. So how about creating a reusable component for it, and rather than having to change it at all places in case of any updates, I just change it in the component, and it is reflected everywhere. So in any such scenario where the out of the box controls are not fulfilling the requirement, you can anytime use a Canvas component. This is reusable across different applications, and how the configuration works is whatever controls which exist already in the Canvas app, you can use those, combine those, and write some logic behind it. An example of that could be, let's say you have checkbox controls in the Power Apps Canvas App Studio, but you want to build out something like, I only want the users to select 2 checkboxes at a time. And this kind of functionality, maybe I wanted it at like 10 or 15 places. So rather than having to build that configuration at 10 different or 15 different places, I can put it inside a Canvas component. I can create some properties, and with that, it will be reusable at different screens. And in case of any changes, I just need to update one place, and it will be replicated on all the places by itself. Now, how do we decide when to use Canvas components? So, as I have already given you a few examples of, how Canvas components work and what are their uses, but when it comes to, if I want to use a Canvas component, what is the difference between Canvas component or any other control which is available in the studio? So, first thing, it is reusable. You can use it at any number of places. And if you create like variables inside of it, it will be specific to the component. It will not be applicable throughout the screen or the application. Comparing this to a collection. So in Canvas app, there are two different kind of storage, local storage that you can use. One is variable and the other one is collection. So if you want to use variables, it will be specific to the control, even if you have multiple instances of it. But in case of collection, that cannot be integrated or separately. If you are using a collection, it will count it as one, and any updates on any of the components will be working on the same collection. But that is not the case with variables. So when you're working with Canvas components, you can reuse those across screens or apps, or even you can publish it to component library, and that way it can be accessible to all the people who are in that environment. So in those cases, Canvas component would be useful. Another another benefit of using Canvas component is it helps to extend the capabilities of out of the box controls. An example that I could give here is, let's say there is a text input control, and I want to have some input validations on it. For example, if I have an email field, I want the users to enter a specific email format like a regex matching. So this is something which is not existing out of the box, but with the help of logic, I can apply it without even using the Canvas components. But the need arises in cases where I have to use that input control at 10 different places. In those cases, I can create a component and use it in all my screens, and that way, whatever input validation I'm applying on the field, for example, the email address or whatever the decimal or integer regex, whatever I'm matching, I can apply it. Compared to the normal text input control which is available, it only allows two formats, number and text. So if I want to apply anything like maybe limit on number of characters entered, or a specific format, then with the help of Canvas components, I can work throughout that. Another example for Canvas components could be, let's say you want to have a menu or a hamburger menu, like where you click on a button and it expands us some properties or some items where I can select and navigate between different screens. So for a component like this, or for you can say a control like this, you can specify a component, and you can pass multiple inputs. So let's say on home page, you only want navigation for page 1 and page 2, but on page 1 you might want to have a navigation for home and page 2. So in those cases, a single component can accommodate different values. So on the home page 1, you can pass the inputs like this is the name and this is the screen I'm talking about, so page 1 and then reference to page 1, and similarly page 2 and then reference to page 2. But when you move towards your page 1, then the references could go to home and page 2. So that is how, with the same component, by just changing the inputs, you're changing the behavior, or what kind of navigation will be done at that place. I have few examples here of the Canvas components which are available for community use. So the first one here is the text input validations. In this one, as you can see in the screenshot here itself, by default, the number or the text input control allows us to only enter text or a valid number. But here, let's say I want to enter an email or a password. For email, the regex is going to be, some characters, then at the rate, then some other characters, and then dot, and then some other characters. So that way, this is a regex for the email address. But let's say, what about password? In some cases, we have different validations on it. Example, I want my password to have at least one uppercase, one lowercase, one number, and one special character. So in those things, you can specify, and you can match the input provided by user, and then if whatever you want to do, whether you want to proceed with the input, or you want to clear it out and show out a message. So if you look at the first image here, the email address, it has this valid email error message showing up, because the email address which was entered in this input, it was not properly formatted. Same for the password. The password was not matching the criteria, so it is showing the invalid password error. But for the URL, the input is accepted because this value is a valid URL. Similarly, if you want to focus more on the design side, this is one example of logical implementation. Now you want to work through the design side. The second component I have on the screen here is for alphabet based slider control. In this one, if you see on the extreme right side, there is a array, or there is a design here which has all the alphabets listed, and whatever alphabet I select, it is going to show me those contact records on the left. So this is something similar to what you have on your mobile devices, where you can view contacts, or you can easily navigate to any contact with on the basis of what character it is starting with. So here, if I have selected G as per the screenshot, the first the uh, the first value which is coming up in my list starts with G. If I move it to some other character, let's say R, then this gallery, this control where I'm seeing all the contacts, it will show it on the basis of the character selected, which is R. And these kind of things are not available out of the box, so we can design these components and use it inside our screens. This way, it is more compact as well as user friendly, and it has an intuitive user experience. So with these components, you can extend the capabilities of out of the box controls. Now, when we talk about Canvas components, what is the level of expansion we can do inside of those? So in those cases, we have separate properties which comes into picture. We have input properties, output properties. So input is like, let's say, I gave you an example of the hamburger menu earlier. So if we are working with the home page, I may want to input page 1 and page 2. But when I work with the page 1, I may want to input home page and page 2. So those cases, I can specify input property, and on the go while I'm working on the application, or then at that time, or based on user input, I can change the input inside these components, and based on those input, whatever logic I have inside my component, that will be retrieved out as output. So input is something which you provide to the component, and it will perform logical operations on it, and output is what is expected out of that component. So if I go back a little bit, here if I see this alphabet based slider control, as an input I'm passing all the alphabets here, but as an output, because G is selected, that will be returned out as my output for this component, and I can use that value to apply logic on my rest of my controls. So here, if I break this out into different controls, where I am seeing different people, it is a gallery control, and based on the output of my component, I am showing which persons are going to be displayed on my screen. When we'll go to the Power App Studio, I'll talk a little bit more about the input and output properties and what kind of options are available inside of it. Okay, So now let's go at the screen and see how these components look at a broader picture. So let's say I want to build a Canvas app, and what I have done here is I went to the make.parapps.com, and from here I have created a new and then Canvas app. So this is the Canvas app which was loaded in the editor here. And if you see that there is a components option along with the screen. So screen is what will be actually displayed as part of my application when I run it. But components are something that you can use these different screens. So when you're just starting with the component and you don't have anything stored already, or you're not using any community components, then you can use this option, new component, and it will create a new component for you. If you want, you can rename it. So let's say I want to name it a new component. So wherever I'm going to use this component now, it will be referenced by using this my component name. So similar to screen, here in the component itself, I am given a white canvas where I can, drag and drop different controls. So let's say if I want to place a label here and I want to place a button as well. So I can do that on the canvas. And if I, go back to my screen and select this custom and then my component. So whatever I have in my component, it is going to be, displayed as is. And if I want, I can have multiple instances of this my component at the same time. Now, I mean, this is just a static one. How can I work with, making it dynamic or based on the user input? So let me go to the components here. And in my component, I am going to create a new custom property. Let's name it button text. And this is going to be a property of type input. If I want it to be output property, I can select it appropriately, and then I can specify what kind of data I am expecting in this field here. So for now we just want text, but if you have any other requirement, you can select the appropriate type here. So now I have selected this as input and created it. So if you see that I have this button text property created here, and if I select this component now, let me select the button here. So now I want to say the button text is going to be my component name and dot and whatever input property I have created, button text. So there will be a default value associated with it, but this is going to be a dynamic thing. If I am placing this component at different places, I can specify which property or which value to use here. So here I have written my component dot button text. It is showing text right now because if I go to my component here and select the button text property, it is text. If I change this to, let's say, Ritika Agarwal, then this will be updated on that value. But this is all on the component level itself. Now let me go on the screen here, and instead of button text to Ritika Agarwal, I'll just change it to Ritika. This component right here is picking the value of whatever I'm inputting here. So I entered Ritika, and that's why it is showing this value here. But now let me show you one other example, because this is a place where I have hard coded the value. But let's say I have a text input control, and I select this and go to button text property. And instead of passing a static value here, I'm going to say text input 2.text. So what I have done here is I have referenced this text input control with my component, and I am changing the button text on the go based on the input property which is available. So if I play this and I change this to RA, you can see within few seconds it is changed to whatever I have entered in this text input control. So this way you can link different components or whatever you have created with the controls which are already existing here. Now I have a few other components imported as part of my application here. So I have a OTP generator. this is a component which I don't want to design, or which I don't want to, focus on the design side, but the logic which is working behind of it. So the OTP generator, this component helped me generate, random number every time. So this works like an OTP. When you want to maybe from an authentication perspective or some other use case, you want to send OTP to the users on their email ID, then you can use this component and it will generate the OTP every time, that number. This regex input is the one I was talking about earlier, where I want to show some specific format. So here I have added this input format here, and the by default format is decimal. Now if I select this and I go to on reset property, you can see I am performing some operations here, that this I am setting this variable and resetting my text input. In this specific control, instead of using the on reset property, I have worked on the text input control itself, and the logic is on my on change property. So I am saying that when the text inside this control is changed, I am matching a specific regex here. If that regex is matching from whatever input property I have provided, this input format, if it is valid, then it won't change. But if it is not valid or not matching the specific regex, I want to reset my control and show an error message. So this is another example. Third example I have here is for component, where I can select how many checkboxes are allowed to be selected at a single time. So if I have entered like 2 checkboxes, then it will work in that way. Now let me do one thing and place all of these controls here on my screen. So if I want to fetch that component, I can click on this custom and I'll fetch all these 3 on the screen so that I can show you. So here I'll move this checkbox here a little bit, my input control here, and then I'll reduce the size of this OTP generator a little bit. Now, to show the output of my OTP generator, I am going to add my expression like OTP generator 1, because that is the name of control here, and then result, because this is the output property where I am returning the OTP. So let me place it here and increase the size a little bit. Now I'll add a button so that I can reset the OTP on the go. So reset and then my OTP generator. Okay. I'll just copy the name from here. The IntelliSense is not picking up my control. So here I have added this. I want to reset my control here, and this is the control I want to reset. One other thing, I have a length property here. So if I want, let's say 7 digits OTP, as you see, this is now a 7-digit input. But if I want to change it, I just click on this button, reset my control, and it is generating a unique or random number every time. So this is how I am not really focusing on the design side, but I am getting a functionality out of it and showing different values based on the user input. And this is something you cannot do directly with the controls. For those also, you have to write the logic. If you combine it inside a component, that way it is reusable across different places. The second example I have is for the decimal field. So let's say I entered some garbage value here. Then it showed me an invalid decimal error. Now let's say I enter a decimal. Because it was a proper decimal, it accepted my value. But if I, let's say, try to put an integer here, then because it's not matching my regex, hence it is showing me an invalid decimal value. So this way I am restricting user input based on my specific requirement and not changing anything. The third component that I have here is for allowing users to select more than 1 checkboxes at a time. But let's say I want to restrict them to only select certain values. Here I have the value selected as 1. So if I select, let's say, option 2 and then move to option 3, my selection for option 2 is gone. Now let me change this value to 2. Now if I come back and I select option 2, I am now able to select 2 options, but as soon as I select option 1, my option 3 selection is gone. So this is how I can restrict the number of controls that can be selected at a time, and all of this is happening on the component level itself. So if I select this, this component also supports vertical and horizontal display of checkboxes. So that is how it is. I have created 2 different galleries, but if I am on the horizontal one only, and let's say I want to see the on select property, it's not here. So I have to select the checkbox and then I can go to advanced. So here you can see there is a specific logic in the backend, which is handling this behavior, that if I have selected more than the allowed limit, it will clear out the selection and allow me to only select a specific number of controls. So these are few examples that you can use to extend the capabilities of your Canvas apps in the screen behavior. If you want, you can try some components of your own, and there is a place where you can share it with the community and use the ones which are shared by community. So I'll open this URL here. This is the reference for the community gallery, and all the components are available here. If you want, you can share them with the community itself if you want other people to use it. And there are a number of components which are available here, so you can either use one of those to make your apps more better or more intuitive for those users. So if you want, you can submit your components here as well. That's all I have, and I think we are almost about time. Let me just quickly check. Okay, we have 5 more minutes. I'll quickly go back and show you one more thing before we conclude this session. So this is a place. Now let me go back and show you one other example of how these components can be published at the environment level and how they can be used there. So this is just, if I don't share this Canvas app with anyone, they won't be able to see my components in the library. So let's say I can create new components from here, but if I have components at other places, how can I import those, or import my other files as well? So there are 2 options. One is for importing the components, and the other one is for exporting. If you want to export these 4 components, you can select the export component and it will download a MS app file for you. So with that MS app file, you can import it in any other environment or any other tenant if you want, and the configuration or the logic behind of all these, it will remain the same. Then if you want to import those components, you can select this. If you have a component in any of the other applications, you can select it from here, or you can upload a file and you'll be able to select any of the MS app files as well. So this is how you can import it inside a specific application. But now let's say you want to share it with the other applications across this environment, then there is a component library which is available. So if I go back to my make.powerapps.com, I can switch to component libraries. And if you want, you can create more component libraries here, or if you want, you can update any existing one. So if I open this in edit mode, there will be some components inside of it, and you can use this as a place where all the components can be segregated and then shared with people inside that organization. So while this studio is opening, let me go back to my app here and show you how you can fetch those components in this place, because here the only option is to get it from the MS app file or export it. So for importing that from a component library, you can click on the plus icon here, and then there is a library component. If your component is not coming here, you can anytime click on this get more components, and it will show you what all libraries you have and the components which exist inside of it. So if I go back to my the my library component libraries that exist, so in this my library I can see two components, component 1 and component 1_1. so now if I go back here also, I can see these two components and I can import them in my application without using the MS app file. So this is also a good way to share the components across your environment. So if I am in this by the devs environment, I can share these components with all people. So this is a component library which is available to everyone. You don't really have to share it separately. So this is how you can, create your own components, import existing ones, and share it across your environments. If you want to share it with the community, you can use this community samples page, and with here you can share with the community and use the resources which are already available. Okay, and that's almost time. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Swami, for giving me the opportunity to share my learnings here in the session today.
Thanks so much, Ritika. It was a wonderful session. I really appreciate your time on the weekend, and you're talking from this meetup group. I really appreciate it. You're doing a lot for the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swami. And by the way, do we have any questions on the chat?
Oh, I didn't see any queries. Have folks online they're watching, but no queries.
Okay,
So
no problem. I mean, if there is any questions at any point of time, feel free to reach out on any of the social media.
sure. And let me introduce our next speaker, Yash Agarwal. Yash, thank you so much, Yash, for joining on this weekend.
Hi, Swami sir. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear. Could you please share your screen? We can
Yes,
flash
sir.
it.
I'm just sharing it now. So please let me know when you can see it.
Yes. Yes, sir. I'm pulling myself out of the stream, so it's all yours. Thank you so much.
Okay. So hey everyone, and welcome to the .NET Learners House. Today I'll be talking about RPA with Power Automate Desktop. So we'll see a couple of interesting use cases for all the newcomers who have just heard about Power Automate Desktop. We'll also see how you can get started with that. We'll see the basic initial steps, and there's a lot more to come. So let's get started on that. A little bit about myself. So I'm Yash Agarwal, and I'm a Microsoft Power Platform Solution Architect and a Solution Advisor. I'm also an MVP and MCT for business applications, and I'm also a super user on the Power Apps and Power Automate community forums. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or also by my blog, following the links on the screen. And you can also drop me an email if you have any questions that I'll be able to answer. So I'll just wait for a second over here if anybody wants to scan the QR code. And let's move to our topic. So what is Power Automate Desktop and what is RPA? So basically RPA stands for robotic process automation, and it's the terminology that we're using to automate complicated processes, or I'll not say complicated processes, but also repetitive tasks that people perform on a daily basis. Like for example, let's say there's data entry that's happening and you have a dedicated source from where the data needs to come, and you have another data storage where the data needs to go. So it's like a process where people are just copy pasting something from somewhere that can be automated using RPA. You could also use scanning, OCR. There's a lot of modules that are already available that can be used. And then with Power Automate, there's a flexibility, or there's an added advantage that you can create two types of flows, that is cloud flows, and then there's also desktop flows, and you can integrate the two also. So we'll see that. But before that, let's see what is the scope of RPA with Power Automate Desktop. What all features are available? I mean, you can automate browser apps. So for example, if you have an application which is running, and in this app, there's no APIs available, because at the moment it's like Power Automate cloud flows support almost everything And basically, if you have an API that is exposed, or if it is a secured API also, you can create custom connectors. You can call those APIs using the HTTP actions which are already available. But let's say if you have a service which does not have APIs, it is a very secured service, or maybe let's say the API development is under process, but you still need some kind of automation to be running on it. You have a couple of use cases that can enhance your system. So how do you do that? There's one feature which most RPA tools offer, and same with Power Automate, that is, you can record a process and you can keep playing that recording as a business process transaction, which is running as an automation using the Power Automate desktop. You can get the data from your site, you can put that data to another data source, you can scrape data, you can also validate some things and perform some actions. So let's say if I wanted to get all the details of a particular book from an Amazon store, so I just go to the Amazon site and I type the name of the book, and then I start scraping data from all the pages that, okay, this book is available from this publisher, this is the price, these are the reviews and ratings, and so on. You can do that category wise also. If you wanted to test your applications, let's say, so you could also use Power Automate desktop for that. But although that is not very recommended that you test applications, but that is again a use case that can be built using Power Automate desktop with the recorder tool on browsers. And let's say if you wanted to automate legacy apps, so if you have a system, or you have to have a solution which is running on within the company network itself, and you're not allowed to access this outside of the company network. And let's say if these apps are secured by a particular, let's say, VNet, or you're not there's no app modernization happened yet on that. These applications do not exist in cloud, they are on-prem applications only, and you still want to automate, and you want to still put some enhancements to that. So how do you do that? You can again use Power Automate desktop with a desktop recording tool capability, record the process, and then keep the flow running based upon any trigger of your choice. You could orchestrate those flows from Cloud Flows, having a scheduled trigger. You could have a person running, you can have a person triggering that desktop flow by manually on demand, and there's many other options available as well. And then there's also process mining with RPA and Power Automate desktop. So what it does is you can have a recorder system installed on a couple of team members in your team, and this process mining, or the process advisor, keeps tracking what all actions they're performing, and that gets recorded. And then you can edit that recording, or I mean, not the recording, but that recording actually generates a certain steps in Power Automate desktop, and then you can edit those steps to match a proper streamlined process that needs to be followed. And then obviously we discussed about data sync and automating repetitive tasks. Now let's take a look at this diagram that we already have here. So as we discussed, that we can have an on-prem system setup, or you can replace this with a cloud-based system also, which does not have the APIs available right now, that you can call from Cloud Flows. So you have your users authenticate via AD authentication. You can have different mechanisms also. Maybe the site or the solution is not authenticated at all, it is for anonymous access, but the system setup is going to be in a way where you have a front end, and then there's a database behind, and you can have certain logic which is running on it. And then this system is not accessible from anywhere. I mean, you cannot get that data outside of that system, and you still want to implement something that runs this automation and runs a process on that particular system, get some data, put some data into it, eases the job of people who are working with it. So what you can do is you can use Power Automate, and then you can use Power Automate to sync that data with a data source or a database of your choice. It could be Dataverse, it could be SharePoint, it could be SQL, it could be anything. It could be Excel also at some point of time. So how it works is you create this recording. Let's say if you want to push some data in the legacy app, and it is based on the data which is coming in Dataverse or SharePoint, where your Canvas apps or your model-driven apps or your portal apps are sitting. So a user signs up on a portal app, and then it gets recorded in Dataverse. Now you want this data to be stored or to be added to your legacy system also, so that this user can access it, or you just need to keep a store of it. So what you can do is every time a user is added, or every time a user record is created in a Dataverse table, you can trigger a flow in Power Automate Cloud Flows that further triggers this desktop flow, which has a process recording where you get the information already from the Cloud Flows as input variables, and then put it on your legacy system, where it's just a UI, and you're, with a few clicks, you're uh, just filling up the fields and submitting a form. We'll take a look at that in action also in a few minutes. But just apart from copying data and all these actions, you can use Power Automate Desktop for a lot more other things like running scripts. So you can invoke PowerShell scripts, you can run command line arguments with it. You can also perform a lot of PDF actions like collating and merging PDFs, getting images or getting content or getting the text from a PDF document and then scanning it, running some AI models on it, store that data, and do a lot more things. There's also Excel capabilities, so you can run macros on Excel. You can get any empty columns you have, delete those empty columns, perform a lot of crude applications on your Excel files also. So let's take some of these. Let's take a look at some of these actions and see how these use cases actually work. And before we go to that, what we have here in Power Automate is, as I've been discussing previously, we have cloud flows and we have desktop flows. So these are the two broader categorizations that we have in Power Automate right now. And cloud flows, it's like you have about more than 400 connectors to different Microsoft and non-Microsoft products and services that you can utilize by creating connections. There are some standard connectors, there are some premium connectors, and based upon your use cases and based upon the license that has been assigned to you, you can use these. And what these connectors do is these are basically API calls that are being made. You just have to pass inputs from previous action or even manually, and then use the outputs of a particular action into any consequent actions that you build in your flow. And there are different types of triggers that you can have on a cloud flow. It can be an automated trigger. For example, let's say in the previous one we saw when a row is added in a Dataverse table. You can also do that in a way where let's say something gets updated in SharePoint, or if you have uploaded a file in SharePoint. And there's let's say if you want to trigger a flow when an email arrives from a specific email domain. So there's a lot of options that are available under the automated flow bunch. And then there's also scheduled flows that you can create. So these scheduled flows are basically running on a recurrence. You can set the recurrence to a day, to a minute, to an hour, based upon the requirement again. And then there's also manual based flows. So it's like a flow button that you can use. The trigger is manual, and therefore you can have a Power Automate app installed on your phones, and you can just trigger the flow by the press of a button from your phone also, and it carries all that automation that it is supposed to do. And then in Power Automate desktop flows, we have two categorizations, which is one of which is attended RPA. The second one is unattended RPA. So the basic difference between unattended and unattended is, as the name suggests, in the attended RPA, you need a user to be monitoring the process or provide certain inputs. But in unattended, it is not required like that. So as an example, let's say if I have to just sync my data from Dataverse upon an event, let's say when a record is created or when a record is updated, and then put that into my legacy system or in my application where or on my web application where the API is not available yet. So this could be an completely unattended process where a cloud flow orchestrates your desktop flow, and it calls it whenever the cloud flow is triggered, and there is no user involvement over here. But let's say there's another process where you're getting this data from Dataverse, but then a person needs to validate this first by clicking a checkbox that, okay, I have verified everything, this is correct, and now this can go to my legacy system or to my web application. So you can create a functionality that every time this user every time a record is updated in your Dataverse, it triggers your desktop flow. In the desktop flow, it sends out an alert or a message notification immediately on the screen that, okay, once you check this checkbox, the next process is going to be completed, or you can also reject that. So once the person checks it, then it moves forward, and this is falling under the unattended RPA thing. And then we also have also there's one more difference between the two. So for unattended RPA, you could do it on a virtual machine and just leave it over there. But for attended RPA, you need a user to be logged into the system and keep monitoring the process. So it's just the basic terminology difference. But the main functional difference is that you don't need for a full scale automation, you could do the unattended part. But then when you require a user input, or when you see that, okay, there might be some data discrepancies, and there might be a chance that I need a user to validate something, you can go the attended way. And then we have cloud orchestrated flows, or you just have simple desktop flows. So on your cloud orchestrated flows, it's like you create your desktop flow, and then you create a connection in your cloud flow so that it can be called upon an event which is happening over there. But if it is a simple desktop flow that you have to run, you can just do it manually by clicking the play button on the Power Automate desktop app, which we'll be seeing soon. And let's take a look at a quick demo. So we have two use cases over here. The first one of which is how do we collate PDF documents? The second one is how can we automate a bookkeeping legacy software that has been in a company for, let's say, years. Now, collating PDF documents, why is this important? So a primary use case over here is, let's say, if you're working for a credit card company where you just have to get the details from the customer, like their address proofs, their IDs, their application forms. You have to collate this as a PDF, and that needs to be sent to a manager for approval, and that approval decides the customer's credit limit or if the credit card needs to be provided or not. Now, there's one resource, not just one, maybe there are a couple of resources depending upon the volume of requests coming in, whose job is just to get these documents from a place and merge them into a PDF, proper PDF with all the documents into one single document, and then send it for approval. Now, it's a tedious task, you get all the documents, download it on a computer, and maybe use some API or do it even manually that you're collating all these PDFs together. What if we can automate it? Let's take a look at how we can do that. Now here in my flow, this is a cloud flow where I have a trigger that when when an item or a file is modified in SharePoint. So basically in SharePoint, I have created certain folder structure where I'll be putting all these PDF documents. And then based on that, I have certain logic set up in my flow that only if this file that is there is a folder, then it is going to get triggered. And then I'm also having some metadata on my document library that, let's say, if it isn't just in process, I have not received all the documents from my customer yet. So whatever documents I have received, I've put there. But once all the documents are received, I'm going to change the status of this folder that, okay, it is now ready to be sent for approval, which is what we're checking in this condition over here, that if it is a folder, only then move forward. And along with that, I also want to check if the metadata has that the send for approval flag is set to yes or no. So only if that is yes, then we want to proceed further. And then what we're doing is we are first getting the folder metadata using the previous actions on the trigger outputs, and then we are listing all the items in the folder and checking for all the PDF documents. After doing that, I have a connection to my desktop where there's a file system set up, and I'm using an on-prem data gateway so to sync between the Cloudflow and my desktop, so that it gets the files from SharePoint, creates a copy of those files on my desktop, and then finally creates a path that needs to be sent to my Power Automate desktop flow. In my desktop flow, what I have is it is just going to get an input, which is the path of the folder from where it needs to get those files and create a merged PDF. And then it has the path where the merged PDF needs to be saved. Now, once I have those details, I have another get file content using path action from the file system itself, which is going to get the content of the merged PDF file and then finally upload it back to SharePoint. So for the scope of this flow, I just wanted to show how those files are created on desktop and then created back into SharePoint. But as an extension to this process, you can already use the already inbuilt connectors, like sending that merged file as an email, or using that merged file to create an approval process flow. Or you can also use it to, let's say, store it in a blob storage, and then it has certain other functionalities sitting on top of it. So let's see how that works. I have my SharePoint over here. I'm going to create a new folder and upload all the required files that I want to merge as PDF. And then I'm just going to put a ID over here so that I'm tracking it appropriately. And once I create this folder over here, I don't have anything in the send for approval metadata. So this is not going to trigger my flow. I mean, it's going to trigger the flow, but then it is not going to continue it into the condition branch that we want to. Once I upload all the required documents over here, I can go back to the document library where we have the approval documents, and then I can change the metadata of my file that, okay, I have all the information from the customer. Now it is ready to go for approval. And once I put it as yes and save it, it is going to trigger my flow. And we'll just see that in a moment. So coming back to the flow page, in the run history, you'll see that, okay, it has started running now. And as I open the flow run history, we can monitor each step, that what is happening and where it is right now. So first, the file is modified and it has triggered based on that. And then we are on the condition loop that, okay, we want to check that if it is a folder, then proceed forward. And if the approval send for approval flag has been set to yes. Now, once those files are created on my desktop, I have this Power Automate desktop flow open over here where we have just 3 actions. The first one is to get an input variable that is the path of the file, and then get all the documents from that file and then merge the PDF file. So using the straight action, drag and drop, merge files, provide your inputs, and then finally the output is the path of the merged file. And we have the merged file over here, which is going to be sent back to our flow. And again, that is going to be picked up by the file system connector, which is going to get the file from here. So let's see that now. And it takes a couple of seconds to merge a PDF with about 10 documents or something like that. And for creating the connection, it should take another 10 seconds. So the entire process is about 30-40 seconds. And while this is happening, we'll see that in the background, the Power Automate desktop is running a predefined function for merging the PDF files. And once the file is completed, it gets created in SharePoint again. So once my approval documents are here, I have a separate document library where I'm going to save the merged files. And I open the merged file, and I'll see that all the individual PDF files that I uploaded are now created as a single document over here. And then you can build the flow functionality on top of it, that once it has moved from a different document library and it has successfully completed the merge, you start the approval process and so on. So we have the document over here, which is created as a merged file. Now, this was the first demo that we had. Now let's move on to the next one, where we'll see that an example of how we can actually record a process on a legacy system, and then that can be used to fill in information from a modern app that we have. Now, an example for this is employee compensation. So employees are going to fill their time on a timesheet app. It could be a Canvas app, and I'm using a SharePoint list as a data store. Once all the data is over there, I have a certain flag on my SharePoint list item that I can send for approval, or the file or this particular entry has been approved. Once that is done, it triggers off my cloud flow, and then it calls my desktop flow and runs that process automation. So let's see that in action now. So as you can see over here, I have a SharePoint list with the list as employee salaries. We have all the details of the employees. There is a pre-filled there's a pre-filled metadata like what is the pay per hour. There are some other items that I need to extract, that okay, if the project is billable or not. What is the type of payment that needs to be provided? How many hours this employee has completed? And then once that is completed, I have all the data stored in my legacy system, in my bookkeeping accounting system. I want to get an identifier back in case I wanted to track that transaction at some point. So I'm creating a record over here directly in SharePoint itself. There could be Canvas app sitting on top of it. There could also be any other application that you've built for internal employees to track time. And once the user provides all these details, there could be an approval process going on. Once it is approved, only then it goes to the legacy system. So this is complete. I've saved the flow now. I have this item created, and I'll see that I have another cloud flow which triggers when this item is approved. So you'll see that I'll change the status as approved, and it is going to trigger my cloud flow now. And again, we'll go back and see in the run history. So this time it is, again, the trigger is based upon a flag. And here I have my Power Automate desktop process, which is actually performing, which is repeating a recording by performing those actions that I have already provided over here. So I have a bookkeeping software that is going to go to the transactions and start adding that data of the employee name, whatever details they have filled. I mean, it was so fast that I couldn't even stop over here. But it is going to get the identifier from the bookkeeping software that this is the ID of that entry that has been made, and then save it back to SharePoint. So if I wanted to track this transaction back, I can do that by getting the ID from SharePoint and then matching it with the ID in my bookkeeping software. So we'll see that once once the desktop flow is completed running, it is going to get that ID, and we'll match it on the bookkeeping software now. So we have the 007 thing over here with the details of the employee and the payments calculations that had to be made. So let's take a look at the process, actually, how it is working now. I'll shift my screen. So here we have our flow, which is on the Power Automate desktop canvas, we can say. And here it's like first it is going to be triggered from our cloud flow, and we have all the input variables that are coming in over here. So what is the account it is going to go? There's some metadata that we are tracking, and then how much is the amount that needs to be put there. So these are default values I've put, but these are all variables coming from my Cloudflow. And then we have one final variable, which is the attribute value, that is the identifier that we need to send back. And you will see here that the recording on a legacy app may not actually, while you're recording, it may not identify all the text boxes properly. So you'll have to identify those text boxes based upon the selectors, and you can also use your hard keys on the keyboard to actually navigate between them. So if I filled the first text box, I want to go to the second one, but my recorder is not recognizing it. So what do I do now? As you can see, I have the seventh action over here, which is send keys, that is shift and tab. So once I hit shift and tab, it is going to move from my first text input to the second text input, and based on that, I'm going to navigate and provide those values. So this is just a small trick of working around with the legacy system when it is not recognizing those fields. If it recognizes, well and good. If not, there's a lot of other methods that you can try out on that. And with that said, we end our second demo, and we'll move on to our presentation next to see what after this what you can do. So let's say if I'm a first time user of Power Automate Desktop, how do I start and what are the prerequisites that are needed? So the first one is you need to install Power Automate Desktop. And if you want to do your browser automation, or let's say you want to automate web applications, you need to get the browser extensions. There are separate extensions for Chrome, Edge, and other browsers. And then if you want to trigger your desktop flows from a Cloudflow, you need to have the on-premise data gateway to do that. So an on-premise data gateway, once you install that, you can create connections in your Cloudflow and call your desktop flows from there. And that is how you can connect the two. And then there's the very important aspect, that is how do I create this entire process? So first you need to identify the scope. Okay, if this particular system or this particular thing can be automated or not. And if it can be, what are the hurdles that I'm going to face? It is always best to draw it on a paper. If not paper, you can also create a visual diagram or a flow chart to see what the actual process needs to be, and then start building it. Because the recordings, when you're doing recording based automation, it is really difficult to record the process first. And if you have to make an edit, you may have to sometimes completely scrap the previous recording and the previous edits you've made, and then start from scratch. So that is the best practice that you need to follow. So first lay out your scope, and then build the diagram, and then finally start building your process. So that is the starting point. And what are the benefits, or what are the what's new over here? So earlier Power Automate Desktop could be used only on the enterprise Windows 10, Windows 10 Pro, I believe. And now in the recent Ignite announcement, they've announced that Power Automate Desktop can also be used on Windows 10 Home. Although there are a certain set of limitations with that, you don't have access to all the premium features. But then for a personal automation base where you want to just learn some things, where you want to automate simple processes like run some command line scripts every time in your system, run some PowerShell scripts, maybe some other scripts also, you could do that. And then you can use process mining and process advisor. So if there are 4 or 5 members within your team who are going to just follow a same process transaction, like get data from somewhere and put it somewhere, so you can put the process advisor on their systems to record those processes, collate everything together, and then finally create one desktop, one Power Automate Desktop flow that can complete these transactions in a proper way. And then there are OCR capabilities, as I discussed earlier. So you have direct actions from PDF. So I'll show that over here quickly. As you can see here, we can extract images, you can extract text, you can extract certain file pages. You can provide the range that, okay, I have a 15-page document, and from these 15-page document, I'll always have to extract the first 3 pages, and then the next one is useful for my customer. You can do that by providing the range over here. And the merge PDF files is the first demo that we've already seen. And you can see that there are a bunch of other actions that you can use over here. You expand them and you'll see the capabilities. And then finally, it's like how what can we do to combine these? So you can orchestrate your desktop flows from Cloudflows. Again, Cloudflows have over 400 connectors. So every time there's an API, anytime, I mean, if the service that you're trying to interact with has an API available, do not go for desktop flows. It is always recommended to use Cloudflows for that. In the case that there is no the desktop flow cannot be avoided, that you need to have that process in a way where cloud flows cannot complete that, then of course desktop flows are the last choice. And then you can pass inputs from your cloud flows to desktop flows, the one which we saw where we were sending the file path for the merge PDF, and we were sending the employee data to the bookkeeping software. And then you can get the outputs. I mean, once the process is completed in your desktop flow, if you want certain output to be sent to your cloud flows, you can do that also, which is what we've seen in the bookkeeping software where we were getting the identifier and updating that in SharePoint. And let's say again on your starting points, if you're stuck with something when you're building your Power Automate desktop flows, or if you've discovered something that you want to share, and if you have some ideas that okay, how the tool can be made better, you can log on to powerusers.microsoft.com and you can create your ideas over there. You can create forum posts. You can also help people if you found something and share your tips over there. With that said, how much time do we have left? About 3 minutes. So Swami sir, do we have any questions?
Uh, no queries at this point of time, Yash.
Okay. All right. So this is all I had, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it was a really wonderful session, Yash,
I
and
mean,
thank you
it
so
was
much for your
just
time.
like a run through of RPA with Power Automate Desktop. There's a lot that's happening, so I recommend everybody just start experimenting with that at least, and then as you start getting stuck with something or start discovering something, share it with us, share it on the communities, and maybe tweet LinkedIn or something like that. So
Cool. So you have given your Twitter handles, isn't it, and other ways to reach you. If someone has
yes,
the
sir.
queries, they might reach you. And it was pretty wonderful session. And thank you so much, Yash.
Thank you
And
so much.
thank you all for joining this weekend. Bye. See you.